take my chances.
I would like to call this meeting of the Fairfield Board of Education regular meeting to order of March 10th, 2015, present. I'm pausing so that Mark will be able to be in his seat by the time I get to his name. Is Mrs. Eileen Lou McCormick, Mr. Mark Patton, Ms. Donna Carnell, Mrs. Jessica Gerber, myself, Philip Dwyer, Mr. John Convertito, Mr. Paul Fattabine, Mrs. Jennifer Maxon Kennelly, and Mr. John Llewellyn. If I could ask you to stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. I see we have one student with us. I'm not sure that we expect, I guess, the other two, but Mr. Kutch, why don't you make your report?
Sure. Well, there hasn't been a whole lot that's happened since our last meeting. There have been a couple of notable, sports results, though. I know that both of our boys and girls ski teams have had a lot of success in the postseason. The girls ski team won states for the third time in a row, which was huge for them, and the boys ski team came in fourth, which is definitely an improvement over recent years, so they're pretty excited about that. Both of our basketball teams are in the middle of the playoffs right now, so don't want to jinx that or anything. They're making a good run. We've had some good club activity, too. Our video club is continuing their ongoing project to make short little feature videos about each different club to show to freshmen that are incoming, show them their different options, because sometimes students don't really know, how to pick clubs, and it's nice to have something to show them. Also, Key Club and Operation Hope are planning a share table with Operation Hope for a food drive. And I think that's all I have to cover for today.
Okay. Any questions for our representative from Fairfield Ludlow High School? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next agenda item. Feel free to stay with us for a while or take off at your pleasure. We're now at the point on the agenda for public comment and petitions. For those items that are on the agenda as voting items, we'll take comments on that when the agenda item comes up. You are welcome to come up now to talk about any item that is on the agenda for discussion, and also you can wait if you wish and make any comments you want to make on discussion items at the time the item comes up on the agenda. You can't do both. So if you do come up now, then for a discussion item, then you can't come up later on. Do we have any members of the public that wish to address the board on a discussion item at this time? Seeing none, we'll move on to presentations. Yeah. We have two presentations tonight, well, three, but two that will involve a PowerPoint presentation. And so item B will have the PowerPoint presentation. Those of us who are in the line of fire with the camera will go and sit in the audience. Then we'll reassemble for discussion on that presentation. Then the group of us will again move out to the audience so that we can make the second presentation. On the first presentation is the CABE Award of Excellence for Educational Communications. We have a colleague who is on her own Board of Education, but is active in CABE, and that's Andrea Velu, and please come forward and make your presentation.
You need to use the mic.
You can use, you should use the mic so that...
People can hear me.
Well, then you can tune into Channel 78 and see yourself on tape.
Right.
Thank you and good evening. It's my pleasure to be here this evening representing CABE and presenting the 2014 Communication Award to Fairfield. The effective communication with parents and taxpayers in your district is a very significant part of your district's operation. It's important for the community to be aware of the exciting activities and events taking place in our schools each day. CABE established the Awards of Excellence for Education Communications in 1975. The guidelines for the criteria that you met were clarity of message, image, consistency, readability, graphics, type, format, your design layout, and the value of the expenditure. It's my pleasure to present this award to your district.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll assemble for the proverbial photo that will be kept for all time.
Doreen should be on this.
I'll stand on this side, Doreen, you stand on that side.
I want to see a Paul photobomb. Come on, Paul photobomb.
Like our student, I welcomed her to sit in on our board meeting for the length of the board meeting, but she has more than a few meetings of her own, so she will take her leave at this point. Ms. Leonardi is making both presentations, and so, Dr. Title, do you have any comments that you want to make by way of introduction?
Just that at the last meeting, Andrea gave you a preview of what the rollout plan was, and now we want to give you a few more details about the online incident reporting platform, so I'm going to let her do the presentation, and we'll step aside and watch the PowerPoint with you. Thank you.
Okay, while this warms up, tonight I'm here to introduce to you and to the community, hopefully over Fair TV, the online reporting system. I know many of you have been hearing us talk about this for a while now, and so I wanted to be able to, do we know what this is about? Technologically. So we wanted to be able to show you the online reporting system, walk you through what the front-end user will see, and let you know that this will go live to the community on our website, the district website, and on each school's website on Monday, March 16th. So beginning Monday, March 16th, students, parents, faculty will have a way to look at and report incidents as a way of helping to add yet another layer of school safety to the district. So looking at why we want to do this, it's our job, everyone's work, to create and sustain and continuously improve a safe school climate. And we look to the work of parents, faculty, community members, staff, and students to help us know what's happening in our community so that we can deal with it and address those issues quickly and efficiently. TIPS stands for Threat Assessment, Incident Management, and Prevention Services. So this is really about getting information into the hands of the people who need it so that they can investigate and deal with issues that create worrisome issues in our schools and in our community. TIPS is an online reporting system. This allows people to report both discreetly, where they can give their name so that we can contact them, but it also allows for anonymous reporting. The tool allows for, will assist administration in monitoring student behavior and the behavior of community members within and around the schools that might have negative impacts on our school climate, and it's another layer of support for our school safety measures. How it works: people will be able to find the TIPS button prominently displayed on our websites as of Monday. And there's a prompt level. You'll see it's quite easy to fill out the reports when I show it to you. And then immediately emails are sent to designated team members at the appropriate site based on the kind of incident that's reported. So if a bullying incident is reported, it goes to the team that looks at bullying. If a school safety issue is reported, then it goes to the team that's assigned to those issues. So these are we went through a process with our school administrations and the teams on the sites to identify those people who are critical in getting the primary email first within minutes and can begin to deal with it as soon as they review that email. And then as reports come into the district, the school administration can create and look at more aggregate reports. So where is the bullying taking place, for example, and maybe make some decisions about supervision, about assigning supervision to different parts of the building based on where issues may be occurring. So it gives us a way to do that. Some important things to note, these are critical factors. This is not a 911 or emergency system. It is not going to be monitored 24/7, 365. It's critical for people to know that this system is only being monitored during school hours when school is in session. That's critical, and you'll see that we've made that prominent on all of our displays. We still believe that relationships are critical, and this is not something we want to do, which is keep people from talking to each other. But this just, again, adds another layer so that students in particular, but others would feel comfortable to share information that would help us. But we still want to encourage our schools, our administrations, our teachers, and our families and students to talk to us and for us to talk to each other and not replace that communication. We offer this report anonymously, but as anyone who's tried to investigate an anonymous report, often there's a lot of information missing. And so we encourage people to report discreetly, give us some way to contact you so that we can, if we have questions, look to getting some answers to those questions. If we get reports anonymously, they will certainly be investigated, but often there's a hole in the information and questions are warranted. So we are asking people to report discreetly so that we can make a difference. And that at no time can disciplinary action, as is in our policy and in state statute, be taken solely on the basis of an anonymous report. Our school district climate team met, and we wanted to make sure that it was clear to folks that anonymous reporting systems open the world to false accusations. And false accusations can be devastating to an individual. They can ruin school climates. They can be just as negative and be used as an alternate form of bullying. And so while all accusations will be investigated, anything that we determine to be false will be removed from any files of the individuals and will not be kept for any reason, because we want to make sure that people don't have records of false accusations in their files. Well, here we go. We can take a look. This is what the front-end user will see. So as of Monday, the TIPS logo that you'll see in a minute on the website, you'll click on it, and this goes to the platform of Awarity. This is not held on our server. There is no login required. This is truly an anonymous platform. It is not held on our server. I apologize that this is the actual website itself, so the type is quite small. But you'll see that highlighted it's not a 911 or emergency reporting system. There's a welcome message explaining what this is for. The report is not intended to replace direct contact. It's offered anonymously or discreetly. And again, the false accusations disclaimer there that we want to make sure people know. So if you're a front-end user, if you look toward the bottom of the screen, you'll see a location group. And that's where you'll see our elementary schools, middle schools, or high schools. And you'll click on one. I'm going to choose high schools at this time. And again, you just keep scrolling down to the bottom. You're looking at a location, and here are our high school locations, Fairfield Ludlow, Ward, and Walter Fitzgerald campus. And you would select one. And finally, you would, on this particular page, here are the incident types. Now, this group of incident types we worked with Awarity. We also worked with a committee of staff and administrators, and also with our district climate team. And we looked at acts of kindness, so people could actually say thank you or honor someone who did something nice. We also looked at any adult misconduct, assault, cheating or academic dishonesty, bullying, harassment, or intimidation, cyberbullying, discrimination, hazing, other, which captures all the things that we might not have thought of, possession of illegal substances, possession of weapons, safety concerns, distribution of illegal substances, self-harm or self-injury, sexual assault, substance abuse, suspected abuse or neglect, theft, threats of violence toward others, threats of self-harm or suicidal thoughts, truancy, an uncomfortable interaction, because most of our kids describe things as, it made me uncomfortable, so we wanted to make sure we captured that, and vandalism. These are certainly, we can change these, update these, add or delete from these, but these were the ones that our committees across the district felt were important to have right available for students and for families. So you would select. I'm going to select, just show you a couple because they're, the behind-the-scenes report is specific. So for example, if someone is concerned that of a threat of self-harm, the screen would be here. And again, you can report anonymously, or you can report discreetly and provide your contact information. You would tell us who's reporting, a student, a parent, a staff member, a community member, or other. If the individual is known or unknown. So if you're reporting for someone you know that you're worried about, you would put in their name and whatever information you have. If they're unknown, you could describe them, approximate height, weight, gender, what they're wearing today, something like that. Again, here's where the database becomes more powerful. Where is this occurring? Where did you witness something occurring that gave you this concern? The date and time of the incident. So where were you? What did you see? And then some of the details. And you'll see these details are exactly what someone would ask if they were doing a threat assessment of suicidal ideation. There is an opportunity here for supporting documents. So if there is a document, someone wrote a note, someone wrote on a desk, someone, any kind of document, a student or a family take a picture, upload the picture, take a screenshot of something on the web, that's where they can add more evidence of what they've seen. And then a bunch of questions, did you witness it? If yes, explain the witnesses. How did you become aware? Explain what the individual's harm was. Is it someone who might be cutting or harming themselves? And then looking at some of the questions that a therapist might ask. Do you know if they have a plan? Do you know if they've attempted suicide before? Are they talking about suicide and wishing to be dead? And these kinds of questions are the kinds of things that if a student came to us and talked to us, we'd be asking. So we try to gather as much information so that we can intervene. Certainly anything about, do they have knowledge or access about weapons? If yes, explain. Any parent or contact information. And again, we ask, if it's necessary, can we contact you for a report, and would you be willing to give us your contact information? So at any time, you fill out this information. There's only one required field. Describe the behaviors. Nothing else is required. So if you describe the behaviors, you go to the bottom, and you review, and then submit. Now, I'm going to go up and do it anonymously, sorry. You would review, unknown. Anonymous. Review and submit. And up will come your report. Again, more information. If this is an emergency, please call 911. And the report that you just filed. So it says threats of suicide. You check your work. You check if everything's there that you want to report. And ultimately, you would click submit. And within seconds, that report would go to the desk of the people who were assigned to investigate that report. So that is what the, what the front-end user sees. Where would you find that link? The link will, on Monday, the link is going to be in the downloads and links section of the district website. You'll see it on the far right, Tips, Report Incident. And it will also be in the same section of each of the schools' websites on Monday. So that is the Tips anonymous reporting system. And if you have questions, I'm happy to answer them at this point.
Thank you very much for the presentation, and let me see if we have questions. Mrs. Lou McCormick, and followed by Mr. Patton.
First, I want to, wow, I'm not used to that volume. First, I guess I can really sit back. First, I want to thank you for doing this, because this is, I think, really excellent, and this, I think, really adds to another protocol that is available to the district. So I think this is a great step. I guess I don't have many major questions, just a little bit of a process. I could see that somebody might be nervous submitting, and I'm just wondering from that person's perspective, you know, how first of all, once they submit something, how can they track it at all? No.
Once it's submitted,
Yeah.
it comes to us, and
Okay.
it's not unlike any other report a person makes. Once they hand it to us,
That's it.
it's our job, right? And we are to investigate. Certainly, there's no way to communicate back and forth unless the person reports discreetly and gives us their name and contact
Right.
information. If it's anonymous, it is truly anonymous.
Right.
So there's no way to interact with the reporter in any way.
I was going to say that it would be nice, I don't know if it's even possible on the system, to just, if somebody wanted to, like if they submitted a report, they could have like a confirmation number, like submission number 1 or whatever, and see if it's under review or if it's been dismissed or closed or confirmed, or just something. Because what if they were nervous to give their name and then it somehow was dismissed, and then suddenly that they said, oh, you know what, it shouldn't be dismissed, now I'll come forward. So that's just one thought, just I don't know how we could think about that, but I could see that in human behavior, that you might do that. At first you're nervous, and then you realized, oh my gosh, because I didn't submit my name, nothing's been done. And then you might feel like you would want to come forward. And then I guess my other question is, how are we going to advertise this somehow to parents and to kids so that they like flash it someplace?
Right now, as we speak, all of the schools have plans to inform students, inform their faculty, and inform their PTA. Tomorrow, a letter will be going out through the campus messenger that explains what this is. I didn't want to send it too early because the button isn't there yet.
Right.
So I didn't want to get people all revved up and have them go out
Yeah.
looking and it's not there yet.
Makes sense.
So we'll be sending that, and then we also have engaged the PTAs, and each of the PTAs will be putting that same letter out in their flashes. So those are the mechanisms we're using to introduce the community, along with certainly tonight
Okay.
and Fear TV, to put it out and forward.
Okay, so then the other one is really my only thought, that if we think about this going forward after we implement it, you know, ways that we might consider, you know, if we want to enhance it later in the future, that may be
Remember
something.
that this isn't ours. We've purchased
That I
this
understand.
from a company.
Totally
who created
understand.
this, so,
Yep, yeah.
thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Patton?
I don't know how loud this is. Actually, quick follow-up to Ms. McCormick's comment about the reference. Is it possible, does the system allow for a case number or a reference number? Because again, say an anonymous person reported something, forget like following up, but what happens if they wanted to report something else related to the same thing, and you know, you could have a case number in a box and say this refers to the same incident, so you're not figuring out, does this go with this one, does that go with this one?
From each report has kind of a tracking number internal to those of us
Internal, okay.
on the rear, on the back end of it. So those of us who are getting those emails, we will have, there's a tracking number, and then it will go into different electronic file drawers, so to speak, based on different information that we can query in the system. So location of the incident, the type of incident. We could look at all of our bullying incidents. If the student's name, if a student is named in the report as the alleged perpetrator of whatever the act is, then that could be tracked as well.
Or cross-referenced. or
Cross-referenced,
whatnot, okay.
yes.
But I guess I see
That's
that.
not for the front-end user. That's
Right, I guess I
that's
see
for
the-
those of us behind the scenes.
The complexity there is you can't even assign a case number if it's totally anonymous, because
it's
then
a-
you'd have to store information.
Right.
And you're not storing information. So, okay, so on that note, 3 questions. I'll go easy to hard. For instances that might involve legalities where the police might need to be informed or involved or investigate something, is this the standard chain of command that you would have for any incident like that?
I worked with the
Drug
Fairfield-
use or anything like that?
There are 3 report types that will be immediately sent to Sergeant Waya, who's our school resource officer. One will be the sale and distribution of illegal substances, sexual assault, and possession of weapons. Those are automatic. Those will automatically go to Sergeant Waya. And I spoke with Sergeant Waya about this, and we went through it all together. There may be secondary people. Once he reviews it, he may send it off to another sergeant who's working within the school, like our SRO, for example. But he's going to be the clearinghouse for the police and these reports on those 3 incident types. If there are other incident types, for example, something that came in that was reported as bullying, but actually started to look like more of a criminal issue that needed to be reviewed, the primary team could send it from themselves to Sergeant Waya as well. So that's the connection between the school district and the Fairfield Police Department.
That's good. I think that'll make a lot of parents feel safer about this whole thing. Will we be getting, as a board, will we be getting any kind of, I guess, generic kind of reports at whatever, a few times a year to say, we had, maybe not, maybe that's too much information to get out there, X amount of uses of the system, X amount in this category, X amount in this category, X amount in this category, that sort of thing on any kind of regular basis?
It's possible. The system is queryable in that way, so I can pull up all the different incident types, and you can get a number of incident types for each one. There are some data reports that I'll be able to pull from the system. So if that's something that's of interest to the board, then certainly that's something we could.
I think at least on a
report on.
category basis, at least for me, that's definitely something I'd be interested in seeing how, because this is a totally brand-new thing. I have not heard from any other towns or people I've talked to in other boards of eds if they have a similar system and how it worked, because nobody seems to know. It's
Right.
kind of brand-new all around. The third question may be a little more complex, and that is, I guess, how do we monitor or prevent abuse? And that could be abuse by students, that could be abuse by people who don't even live in this town, who just found it on the Fairfield town website and went, oh, I'm going to click this and make a bunch of, trouble. Is there any way to...
With anonymous reporting systems, you open up yourself to anonymous reports that could be mischievous, let's put it that way. Our job on the other side, those of us who are going to get these reports are concerned about that. We're concerned about spinning our wheels. We're concerned about spending valuable time, resources on things that may or may not be accurate. Both the company and the school districts who are using it, most of them out in the Midwest, this is a Midwestern company. I spoke to my counterpart in the Tulsa Public Schools who uses this and has been using it for many years. They said in the initial phases, you seem to get a bump of reports. And we had the same when we initially put in place the bullying policy, Policy 5330. We had a bump in bullying reports in the first 3 or 4 months. Everything became bullying, right? So I imagine we're going to get a bump in reporting as this rolls out, and then things even out. When I spoke with Sergeant Waya, he said when they implemented the text-to-tip line in the Fairfield Police, same phenomena happened. There's an initial bump, and then things seem to even out, and people it's not so novel anymore. It's just another layer of safety there. So we're going to be monitoring the number. We're going to be monitoring, remember, those of us who receive these reports all have full-time jobs too.
Right.
We're not investigative officers. We all have full-time jobs too. So obviously, we're going to be monitoring that, and we'll be talking about it as this rolls out.
That's a little bit of why I was kind of worried, and, you know, what happens if we get legitimate reports. Certainly, even if it's an avalanche of them, you know, that's just the nature of why we did this. But
Right.
if it's, you know, whatever, if it's people, you know, just trying to cause trouble, and, you know, we know there's always that sort of thing that happens. And then the flip side is electronic kind of abuse where, you know, do we have any kind of protections in place for the system to get, you know, like your email gets hijacked, where electronically, you know, something could be, you could be getting a bunch of like junk mail through the reporting system. Is that even possible?
All of this reporting system is at kind of bank level encryption. So
Okay.
it's quite a high level of encryption. I don't have all the jargon
No,
and
no, no,
terms
that's-
for that.
but that's
it
kind of
is
a good
an
example.
encrypted,
Yeah,
it's
sure.
held at an encrypted, you know, we're not managing this. This is being managed by Awarity, by the company, in an encrypted way, just like when you go into online banking. So it has a high level of security in that vein. Can I guarantee that there couldn't be some kind of virus or some kind of, you know, cyber hacking? I can't make that
No, but I
claim.
think the key phrase you use, I don't know if the press is going to take the quote but out of context, but bank level encryption is kind of a good,
It's a very high level of encryption.
okay. That's it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Mrs. Maxon Connelly, out of deference to the student, I'll go to the student next, and then Ms. Carnell. And you raised your hand, Ms. Gerber.
First, obviously, thanks as well to Ms. Leonardi, but also behind you, there's, I know, your small army of community volunteers. I don't know what other staff members or community members were a part of this, but I know that this was a community selection after a lot of hard work, and I just wanted to, through you, thank them, because I think this is an extremely impressive addition, well worthwhile, and so I'm thrilled to see it and thrilled to see it in this form. I also would echo Mr. Patton's comment that I certainly think a report to the board at some point would be appropriate, if not simply because we obviously have to defend the use of budget dollars on that, and while I think it's going to be easy to defend, I still would be interested in seeing that at some point in time. And obviously, we are seeing that there is a trade-off when we have something that is not in-house, that there's this trade-off that with anonymous reporting comes all of these things. And I suppose for me, it's just the reminder that there is a sizable comment box there. So in the situation such as Mrs. Lou McCormick described, if someone submitted an anonymous report, has second thoughts, they can just submit a second one and even reference, I earlier did this if they so chose. So there is that opportunity. I also appreciate the fact that, if I heard you correctly, so it will be through Infinite Campus that parents are going to be informed of this? You said Campus Messenger, and I want to just confirm that was Infinite Campus?
Yes.
Because I appreciate that we'd had a comment regarding not relying solely on PTA for the dissemination of this information, so appreciate that it's being done. Obviously, district-wide, we're taking responsibilities, and I'm sure the PTAs are interested in disseminating it as well.
Suggestion to send it out to the PTAs actually came from a parent who called my office and suggested that I add that as another layer because people didn't always check their Infinite Campus Messenger.
I agree, but at least this way, you know, primarily it is the district that's taking responsibility for that dissemination. So that was it for me, so thank you very much, and thank you for the presentation.
Okay. Please ask your questions. John, did you have your hand up as well? No, okay, but I'll just want to put you on the...
Sure.
Please, ask.
Thanks. I wanted to say, first of all, that it's definitely a great idea. I know that, you know, students always have trouble going with this sort of thing to, you know, different figures, so I think it's a great idea, you know, out of that regard. But I just had a brief question. I know that you already mentioned the Infinite Campus notification stuff, and I was just wondering, you already showed us the, you know, how you get to it from that web page, but I was wondering if it would be available to, is it going to be on the independent school websites or on the Infinite Campus app? Because I know that, no? Okay, well, didn't think so. But I know that so many students lean really heavily on that. But if it is going to be available on the individual school websites then?
It is, it'll be in that same hot links and downloads section of each school's website and the district homepage. So folks can kind of put a link to that right on their app, on their phone, and there it is, right there. And it's usable by the applications, by any tablet, any phone. It's usable that way.
I was just wondering because I know that I have a link to my school's webpage on my phone. I rarely visit the district website.
It's okay. It's all right.
Our district webmaster will be happy to hear that. Maybe not. Any other questions or comments? Ms. Carnell?
Thank you for the hard work and to the team. I think it's great. And I'm not sure this is a question or just trying to understand something. As you said, people that will be receiving this have other jobs. How will the time issue be monitored? Like, how will it be that if something is an emergency, it would go to Sergeant?
If it is
Sergeant.
one of those 3 incident types, it'll immediately go to Sergeant Waya through email.
Only if the reporter says that it's an emergency.
One of those 3 incidents, possession of a weapon.
Right.
Sexual assault, or the sale or distribution of illegal substances.
So it's set up for that?
It
that
is
if-
set up for that.
Okay.
That's why it kind of took us a longer time. We couldn't just buy it and put the button out there day one.
Right.
We had a lot of
Okay.
back-end work to do, making assignments, getting people trained, getting people up to speed.
Okay, that I understand then. What would be the time frame, I guess, for the non-emergency, shall we say?
It's going to remain to be seen. People are, for example, myself, I'm listed on a number of primary teams. If I get the email, but I'm in the midst of a 3-hour PPT meeting, it's going to take 3 hours before I see it at least, right? So that's why we want to make sure it's critical for people to know that this isn't an emergency system.
Right.
It's not being monitored minute by minute. People are going to get them as they get regular email, and they're going to check in and move to see what's happening and then follow through and assign tasks within the investigation, just like they do now. This doesn't increase the speed with which things happen.
Right.
That's why we want to make sure that everyone is well aware that if an emergency is occurring, this is not the system. Call 911.
Right, right. And then, excuse me, just the last thing. I know on the anonymous part, this can't be done, but if somebody does put their name in it, is there a way that this person can find out the outcome or that it is being addressed? Or, I know that's
It's gonna
walking a
depend.
fine line.
That would depend. It's going to depend on whether or not there are personally identifiable information, whether or not it's moving, if it's getting into the personnel ranks, for example, then they're not going to get any information about what's happening because that becomes confidential. I think there are some opportunities where people are going to know what happens, not because we tell them through the system, but because they see action being taken, things happening. But confidentiality ensues in lots of places. So I think you'd have to be careful about, us getting back to the community saying, here's what we're doing, here's the investigation, here's how we're doing it. So I think that would probably not be the case. Thank you.
Mrs. Gerber?
I had a question about the timing. So say you get an anonymous report. How much time do you put into investigating that report, especially if it's anonymous, so you don't have someone to refer back to before you say, we're not getting anywhere? Is there some, I mean, I know that there must be a lot of different variables, but is there some period of time where you'll say, okay, you know what, we're not going to, we're getting dead ends everywhere? And would, in that case, if you do get dead ends everywhere, do you still kind of keep that in kind of like a cold case file so that if somebody sends you a second thing saying, I sent an anonymous report about X, Y, and Z, you would be able to pull it back out again? But I guess I'm just curious, again, as you said, everyone has full-time jobs, so how much time do you have to put into an investigation before you put it to the side?
It really is case-specific.
Right.
It depends on the amount of information we get in the report. It depends on, for example, if it's a location in the school, that might drive people to go and look at the security cameras, and that might give us more information and give us, we'd have to look through the video, and that takes time. So I think there are a number of factors that play into the speed with which an investigation happens. Certainly, if we have insufficient information from an anonymous complaint or anonymous report, we'll do everything we can until we hit a wall.
Right.
And then we close that report because we can't go any further. There's nowhere further to go, but we may monitor something a little more, that might be where the administration says, you know what, that was taking place in after-school activities or at an event off campus. We might want to beef up our visual inspection of those events and maybe add more supervision or that kind of thing. So it really is very case-specific, just like it is now. When we get anonymous reports now through our current systems, through our current paper, the paper system, it all depends on how much information we can go forward with until we have to close the case and then keep monitoring to see what's happening.
Okay. And then I guess, and I'm sure, again, there are a lot of different variables depending on the case, but like approximately how many people receive the anonymous tip? Like, let's say a complaint is made at a school. So, I mean, I guess you get everything?
No.
Or no, you don't?
I
Okay.
get bullying and cyberbullying
Okay.
as my role as the district climate
Okay.
person. Central office, there are a couple of instances, obviously adult misconduct goes straight to Ann Leffert in HR, so she'll get that automatically. Most of the incident reports are school team-based, so the building administration and/or perhaps the deans, those folks, school counselors, if you think about the suicidal ideation, the self-harm, those kinds of things go more toward the school counselors.
So each
psychologist,
incident
social
is
worker.
unique in terms of the grouping of who gets the response.
Yes, and that was determined by us. We
Okay.
sat down as a group, we looked at all the incident types, and we identified the players
Right.
who would be the initial team, and then certainly those players who are going to be secondary teammates who might get the next level after the initial review of the case.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I know this was a tremendous amount of work already, and but I do really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mr. Llewellyn.
First of
Mr.
all, I'd like
Confortito.
to thank you for implementing this, because I think this is a great addition for the district. Following on the last question about the number of key holders or the number of people to whom an email is going to go, what's kind of the minimum number? And then how does one clear something so that there's redundancy in the process, or at least checks and balances?
The smallest number goes to adult misconduct. That goes to the building principal or headmaster and to Ann Leffert, period.
That's it, okay.
Because that's a personnel issue
Right.
driven from that level, as it is now, right? Those
Correct.
reports don't go in wide release. Those reports go straight to HR and the building principal. So that is the lowest number. The highest number would be things like, of the initial report would probably be 6 people, actually 8 people at the high school for some of the reports where you would have the headmaster, the 3 housemasters, and the 3 deans. Those would be kind of a higher number for the initial email.
Right.
And then it can be distributed out. The headmaster might say, you know what, I see it, but I don't need to do anything further. I'm going to assign it to this dean or this housemaster as the investigative team, which is really similar to the way it is now.
And then what's your process for ensuring that everything either gets, dispelled or confirmed? And then, in a timely fashion, if it's going out to 6 people, is there a process in place where there's a report generated, it's gone to these people, and how do you know you don't have 6 people working on it?
Well, in some cases, you might have 6 people working on
Well,
it, frankly.
not
but
initially.
Each person, when you get the email, you have a certain period of time before you get a reminder email to go check again.
Okay.
And you have to acknowledge receipt of it. You have to then, then the assignments get made. And once, for example, I might not have an assignment in investigation, but I'll know what's happening in the investigation from my screen, so I can monitor the investigation. So that's how those things happen.
Okay, thank you. And I think another point is it'd be great if the board could get quarterly reports, but I clearly wouldn't want reports, or I'm not sure if it would be beneficial to have reports on number of incidents reported. It would probably be better to have the number of incidences that have been confirmed, so that we're not blowing up a number, making things look worse than they actually are. I mean, you could say the number of investigations, but I
Yeah.
think to report, kind of by category would be more beneficial on the reality of it rather than the universe of it.
Now, I guess what I would appreciate, at least in this first few months of rollout, is to see what comes in,
Of
and then
course.
maybe I can help give you some information about the kinds of reports I think might be helpful to you and helpful to the community. I don't know, we don't have any reports, I don't have kind of a sandbox to play in to see what the reports might look like.
Right.
So I'm really waiting for these first round of reports to come through to see what might happen.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Mr. Convertito, followed by Mr. Fattabine.
A couple of questions and our concerns. And to follow up on Mr. Lalonde's question, how many people does it take to clear a report? Is it singular, or is there a duplicity in the system?
To close a report, I think once the assignments are made, the people who are assigned to the task close the report. Right, so if it's, Anne and myself, assume I'm the building principal and Anne and myself get a report of adult misconduct, we collaborate to close the report.
Okay. So
But
that
again, I haven't seen it in its entirety yet, so we're going to learn some things.
Okay. My other question is, and there's always a risk with anonymous reporting, okay? You get a report that John Convertito is bringing drugs into school. You get a police referral on that, okay? How is that then investigated or followed up? Is that strictly a police matter at that point?
No, it's not. It would be a collaborative effort between the building administration and the police, as it is now.
Okay. So John Convertito brought alcohol on the 8th grade trip to Washington, D.C., which I know probably should have said that, but because we don't do it anymore. Okay.
Yeah, they're all going soon, so. yeah.
Okay.
John, this is on tape for all
All
time,
right.
you know that.
So that happens in year 1. Okay. Year 3, John Convertito is now a junior. Okay. Is that cumulative in John Convertito's record? That there was an
Within the
unconfirmed
school.
anonymous report?
It doesn't follow them from elementary to middle to high, but within the time frame within that school. So it would be searchable if he were at Fairfield X High School, and something happened as a freshman, and something happened as a senior, you'd be able to see, just like you do in his disciplinary record, you'd see all those things. But it doesn't follow him from school to school, level to level.
So an unconfirmed anonymous report would stay in their record?
No, unconfirmed anonymous reports are going to be removed from the record.
Okay.
Anonymous reports that are unconfirmed or
Oh, well,
found
because
to be
you
false.
said found to be false, not unconfirmed. There's a difference. There's. Okay. Okay, so those are expunged.
Yes.
Okay, so, or they never go in the first place?
If an anonymous report comes in that a student was in possession of an illegal substance on campus
Okay.
or in a school-sponsored activity, my guess is that goes into the system. It would be closed. It would become a closed case. It wouldn't be in the student's disciplinary record,
Okay,
so it's in the closed case in Awarity.
okay.
If 4 years later there's another, you would see that there's a pattern developing for this child, but it still wouldn't be in their disciplinary record, their educational record for the school district. And it would be there as unconfirmed. No disciplinary action warranted, case closed. But you'd be able to see a pattern, which you really do want to see in these investigations. For example, a bullying claim, if a pattern starts to emerge of those kinds of actions, but it doesn't go into a student's educational record, it's not maintained by the school district that way, and it would be in there as unconfirmed.
Okay. So that's maintained by Awarity
Yes,
in their database, and it is searchable by our people as
just
a
our,
cumulative
just our
report.
folks. And just the ones who have licenses. We've only licensed, we've licensed about 108 folks from central office through the building people, 108 folks, guidance counselors, deans, administration, Sergeant Waya. Those people have been licensed. They're the only licensed users in the district, and they can only search within their realm. I can search it all. Dr. Title can search it all, but Jim Coyne can only search Fairfield Ward High School, so he can see other children in other schools.
Okay.
Very similar to the way IC runs now.
And you may not know the answer to this, but I'd like at least to get a legal opinion on it. Is that considered an FOIable record?
Is that, no,
FOIable, Awarities?
not an educational record,
It's a
under
public- is-
FERPA.
No, is it FOIable? Awarities database, is that FOIable? Is that considered a public record?
I don't know, but I can check.
And,
Any other questions,
Yes.
Mr. Constantino?
okay, and do we have an indemnification agreement with Awareness in case they are cyber hacked?
We do have a contract with them, yes.
Do we have an indemnification that they hold us harmless
Yes.
for any damages if they're hacked?
Yes.
Okay, and that's been reviewed by council?
Yes.
Mr. Fattabine?
Thank you for all this. This is, like with any new technology, it could be a great benefit, but there are also some risks whenever you do any technology of harm. My first question basically relates to, you indicated the 3 instances in which you have referrals to police.
Yes.
I believe there are weapons involved, drugs involved, and sexual assault.
It's possession of weapons. There are 3 different substance abuse categories. Only one goes straight to the police, and that's sale and distribution. Possession or being under the influence, they do not go straight to the police. That would be secondary, just as it is now. We handle that on campus. But the sale and distribution of substances goes directly to the police.
All right, but not possession.
Correct.
And the weapons was what you did? If you-
Possession of a weapon.
Possession of a weapon, all right.
And sexual assault.
I guess my question is I would think, I would think sexual assault may not be broad enough. And if there's a threat of imminent harm to someone, anyone, it may not be sexual, but there's a threat of imminent harm to someone, would that be something that would be referred to the police because it's imminent, or in a sense you're saying that's not going to be referred because we don't believe that's
No.
sufficient?
In fact, I need to correct myself. Threat of harm to others is the 4th. So if a threat of harm to others report comes in, that goes immediately to Sergeant Wyatt. I apologize.
All right, so there are.
There are
I
4.
thought that would be the case. I was hoping that would
Threat
be the
of
case.
harm to others.
All right.
You're
So all right. So that's clears that up. The other question I had was in your PowerPoint presentation, you had indicated that any unsubstantiated accusation or accusations confirmed to be false will be removed from the falsely accused person's record. And I guess the question I have is to how that unsubstantiated accusation is interpreted, because obviously it's when an accusation's been proven false, that's a determination and fairly clear. But it's also sometimes hard to, and it's not proven true either. And the question is, what is substantiated? You may have some basis for it, but there have been many instances where people have a basis to make a report, but have later been proven through extensive means to be untrue. So here you may have a situation where you have an accusation, it's neither true nor false. What happens to the person's record? Is it still in there as an accusation, or is that going to be removed as well?
It would be the same as Mr. Convertito's question, as I understand it. It would be housed in Awarity as a report, documented as unsubstantiated, but there in case there's a pattern. So, for example, again, if there's a report of a bullying incident, and Andrea Leonardi is the bully in the report, but that's found to be unsubstantiated, there's not enough insufficient information to determine anything, that would remain in the Awarity system. It wouldn't go to my personnel file or to my student record at all, because the investigation takes place there. So the investigation would be there, all the documents of what we looked at, what we saw, what we determined, and that it was an unsubstantiated report. But 2 weeks later, another anonymous report comes in, and yet again, Andrea Leonardi is named as the potential perpetrator of the act. Then it raises the level of concern among the investigator to say, maybe, we're seeing a potential pattern developing here. We may need to bring in some more people, do some more work, talk with someone else, maybe ask a social worker or a psychologist to interview the student, some other things. But it wouldn't go into a student's educational record or to an employee's personnel file unless it was a substantiated, proven act.
Well, substantiated in my mind is different than proven.
I'm not an attorney, I know.
Well, that's my question, is what do you mean by substantiated?
If it was determined that there was sufficient evidence to provide disciplinary action of some kind.
So proven to be true.
proven to have merit.
Not merit. Well, that's the question. That's my question. In other words, my concern is that what is determined to be substantiated in a situation of when.
Can I interrupt just for a moment? Can I suggest that the answer is that the only thing that shows up in the student files is if you have sufficient reason to take disciplinary action?
Yes. Or
And
the
so-
adult's record, yes.
Or the adult, and absent disciplinary action, then it stays on the server, if you will.
Right, in other
Does that
words,
answer your question, Mr. Fedderby?
Not necessarily, no. My question is to what level of, in other words, my concern is you may have a situation where two parties are upset with each other. And every 4 months, an anonymous report comes in about someone doing something because they're upset with each other. So this person has a record of every 4 months getting a accusation that may have very little substantiation, but may have some, in the sense that there was a report made, there was some fact which gave it some degree of merit, but not enough to rise to a level of any disciplinary action or any merit, or any proven to be true. So so I guess that's my concern, is what would substantiation mean? What would it be needed to not have it unsubstantiated and removed from the record? What level of substantiation is going to be necessarily applied in this instance? I mean, that's just, it's something less than proven to be true, but it's something. What would be an example you can give where you, maybe that would be in your opinion, an unsubstantiated report and one that is substantiated? To get a flavor as to how that's going to be interpreted.
Well, if I had a report that a student, a report came in that perhaps a student smelled of alcohol, and so the suspicion is that the student is under the influence. The student is, asked to come to the nurse's office, and the nurse sees a student with bloodshot eyes, is a little wobbly. That would be substantial evidence in terms of disciplinary action. We're not in a court of law, so this isn't beyond a reasonable doubt. This is a preponderance of the evidence kind of standard. That would be sufficient evidence in our current system to say, in all likelihood, the student is under the influence of alcohol, and therefore disciplinary action. It's not a legal standard. It's not a courtroom standard. It's a school standard for disciplinary action. So that would be something that could be substantiated by the report.
I think it's the same as we are doing it now. The difference is the reporting mechanism has changed, right? So the same standards of conduct or misconduct on the part of adults or students that we use now are still in play here. So all the same rules and legal protections that students have under the system where, a teacher walks into the principal's office and says, I just saw Joe Smith do X, and the principal goes and investigates it. It's the same thing as if the teacher fills out something online and sends it into the principal and says, I saw Joe Smith do X. Same procedures, same level, same thing we're doing here, and the same thing on the teacher side. And that doesn't change. This is just a different way of reporting, but the decision rules about guilt or innocence haven't changed.
Any other questions, Mr. Fedderby?
That's it?
One moment, if I can. You've brought it down a couple of times and put your microphone back up. Did you want to ask a follow-up question at all, or has the conversation answered your question?
I briefly wanted to, but it abundantly answered my question.
Okay. Mr. Convertito.
I just wanted to back you up on the FERPA issue. Is Awarity's database considered FERPA protected?
It's not educational record. Therefore, it's protected because it's encrypted and only given to licensed users. It's only available to the users licensed by the district, period. It is not educational record like a report card because it won't be maintained beyond the student's life in that school. It's not maintained by the district. It's Awarity.
So do you know where I'm going with this? Here's my concern. You got 10 complaints on John Convertito. okay, during his high school career for drugs and alcohol, okay, or whatever, okay? If that's not considered an educational record and protected, okay, is that database searchable by law enforcement officials? Is that FOIable by anybody in the public? Because it's being paid for by public funds.
Like I said, I have to ask the FOI question of an attorney. I don't have that answer for you tonight, but I will.
Okay.
Is the
That's a-
database searchable under subpoena by law enforcement? I don't think it's searchable by law enforcement.
Okay, by the same standard, if I write out a physical complaint to you saying John Convertito is using drugs in school, is that considered an educational record?
No, we don't maintain those anonymous, we don't maintain anonymous paper files now.
But if you get a complaint against me that somebody has signed out in the school district, okay, that goes into my record, right?
It only goes into your record if it's found to be a disciplinary offense, if it's substantiated.
If it's not, it's
If
thrown away.
not, it's, I believe it's held in the personal notes of the person investigating until such a time as the student graduates from that school, in which case then it's destroyed. It's not educational record. It's not held forever unless there's a disciplinary action.
Okay. I just want to make sure that the reporting system now, those records, have the same legal controls as this new system. And my fear is that this new system is much more open to FOI, and it's a very big fear of mine, okay, that database is searchable under an FOI complaint.
I will find that out for you.
Thank you.
There are no other questions. I have a couple of questions. No other questions. The issues that require you to be a mandated reporter
Yes.
may go beyond the 4 issues that you mentioned. Is that a correct statement, or am I incorrect?
When you, in this system, when you open up the incident report for suspected abuse or neglect, the mandated reporter definitions are right there for the staff.
Yeah.
Staff
So-
are mandated reporters, they report to DCF.
Right, so these 4 issues are issues that go directly to the police. But
Correct.
there may be other issues that they tick off that would create a mandated reporter process, and some staff member would follow up on that.
They would follow the same process they follow now.
Right.
They would communicate with the hotline for DCF and fill out the paperwork required.
These files that are in the internet, or wherever they are, they're not in the student files.
Correct.
When a student graduates from 12th grade, they're all erased.
They're gone.
They're gone.
Yes.
You mentioned when they leave that school, when they leave elementary school and go to middle school, they follow them, or do
No,
they?
They're gone.
Okay, so whatever,
Only within the life within that school building.
yeah.
And then they go away, just like we do with paper now.
Yep.
They go away, and then the student has a clean slate starting middle school and begins again.
I assume that the only required field is a kind of a narrative description of what happened.
Correct.
I assume that there is some general mailbox that those go to that may be not all that specific, so you can't send them to a school, you can't send them to a specific staff person. There may be some that the student just doesn't give a whole lot of stuff at all. I assume somebody will be assigned to follow those.
The first 3 questions, what level, elementary, middle, high, what school, and what incident type, those are required.
Oh, those
You
are
have to pick a school, you have to pick you have to answer those 3 to get to the next round.
Okay.
The next round,
No,
it's only
that's
the
okay. I
narrative.
didn't see the asterisk that said required field. Those are required fields, so
Correct.
that's good. My last question I won't ask. How many hours did you put into dealing with the back office side of this software? I know that it is a tremendous job to deal with setting up all the protocols and whatnot, so I congratulate you and your staff team for fitting that in within your existing duties. Thank you. Are we ready to go on to the next PowerPoint presentation, which is the school climate survey results?
Like some water. Something else.
You'll notice that neither of these things has special education attached to it, right? Remember my primary title.
And for board members, we took about 45 minutes on 4 or 5 pages. I'm hoping that's not the time that we'll be taking on this number of pages.
Okay, just for the board and for the public, I did put the PowerPoint presentation on slides for you, but there are so many things that are really not readable in slide form because the type is so small that I made the pages for you in the back. So the larger graphs and the narrative parts are available in the back for those who need it. All of the information in tonight's presentation is already published on the websites for the community. Okay, so this is about the 2014-15 school climate survey results. So just in terms of process, as you recall in last year's budget, our original plan for how to conduct the school climate survey using the National School Climate Center survey was cut from the budget during the budget process. So at that point, we needed to go, the district climate team, which has about 60 people on it, had to go back to the drawing board and decide how we were going to create a survey that was at no cost, or at least at little cost. And so at that point, we kind of grabbed a subcommittee of volunteers, and I have to thank them. These women were really dedicated. They spent a lot of their summertime with me drafting, researching, looking at different freeware out there. So I really need to thank them, and I'll name them in a couple of seconds. And we spent July and August. We met, I think, 7 or 8 times, 3 or 4 hours at a clip, to craft what we thought was a survey that would get information that we needed. And we presented it back to the district climate team in its entirety in September. They unanimously endorsed the survey at the end of September, and then we developed together a process for completing the survey and distributing it out to the schools in early October, or in late October, actually. Information about the survey was sent to parents through Infinite Campus Messenger on multiple occasions to remind and encourage participation. PTAs and the PTA Council were instrumental in encouraging and working with parents at their schools and at the district level. Staff and students were given the survey, given time during the school day to complete the survey. We were able to pull the raw data almost immediately off the survey, and we provided that to the staff at the schools within a couple of weeks so that they could use the data to begin to think about, with their school climate team and with their teachers, on setting goals and targets in the school climate, in the school improvement plan, as well as in their teacher evaluation plan, which requires use of this data. We met again with the district climate team. We reviewed the raw data. We thought about a process for how to pull data together. And we came up with kind of an aggregate process that you'll see tonight. But the raw data is also there for everyone to dig deeper should they wish. These were the women who worked very hard with us. You'll see that they are that there are parents and staff members. You'll see that many of our parents also have other roles that they play that made them uniquely qualified to work with us on this work. And I have to thank all of them, including our staff members, Katie DeMarin and Karen Campbell, who really did donate a tremendous amount of time to this effort. We learned some lessons. As you know, that one of the things I am not is a survey creator. And so neither were any of the women around the table as we tried to do this work. So we did learn some lessons, both as we were building it and from feedback we got from the community, students, parents, teachers. Our parents of kindergarten, 6th, and 9th grade students, we got some information, some feedback that said, October's too soon in the year for them. It's hard for them to respond to some of the school climate issues, and so we can take that and think about it for our next round. Some questions, again, I formatted incorrectly, and so we were unable to get multiple responses to some of the questions, and we decided in the midst of the survey not to try to fix things because it would skew the results. So those questions were thrown out in terms of data for this round, but we can easily fix them for next. We learned a great deal about how families have used the IC and how families view these surveys. We got a lot of feedback from families that in most families that spoke to us about it, they tend to have kind of one family member who responds to these surveys rather than both parents. And so we learned that may skew to the low end the numbers of in terms of parent participation rates, because we did parent participation by individual parents. And so if a family is responding to the survey and only one adult in the household is responding, then that would skew those downward. The other thing we learned in terms of Infinite Campus is that most families share an Infinite Campus password. They don't each have an Infinite Campus password. And in terms of using Infinite Campus for the survey, once that happened, then they were locked out, and that became something difficult, and none of them really wanted to have another password to remember. And I can certainly empathize. And then we chose in our district climate level to send the instrument out by school. So if you went to Burr, rather than having the parent respond to, I go to Burr school, it just only went to the Burr community. That was good on the front-end user side, but it made it difficult on the data gathering side. We had to do a lot of collapsing of the data, which made that very difficult, kind of to pull the surveys together and do a lot of work with the data and aggregate the data back and forth. It became very difficult, and we didn't foresee that. And then obviously, as you know, that we received questions, a lot of questions before the survey went out about whether or not the survey was truly anonymous. I can guarantee you it was, but those concerns were raised by the community, as you know. The district team, we wanted to make sure that we cautioned everyone who is looking at this data that this is a kind of a homegrown survey. It has not been vetted for validity and reliability in any way, so you need to take this data with that in mind and understand that. We've been asked by a few people to think about doing comparative analysis between the climate survey we did 2 years ago by the National School Climate Center and this survey. And frankly, they don't really compare well, so it's hard to see, to build a trend from that. And certainly 2 data points is never a trend anyway, so, but I think at this particular point, I'd caution people, use extreme caution when trying to do comparative analysis between that instrument and this one. If we are going to continue to use this instrument, even with whatever corrections or modifications, then we would want to consider this to be the baseline data for the survey. And then also the graphs that I'm about to show you, which look at the aggregate data and the average responses, I think should be noted that they are simply average responses. And if you want to dig deeper into the raw data, which again is on the website for everyone's viewing, you'd want to look at the kinds of questions and then the distribution of answers to see and think about whether or not action needs to be taken in a particular area that you see as particularly positive or as something that needs work. So that's a note of caution. When we did the district climate team looked at the data, we wanted to think of a way to discuss the data and look at it in domains. And so we came up with 5 domains for parents and students and a 6th for staff only, which is really a mirror of the National School Climate Survey. That's how they organize data. And so we had the domain of the institutional environment, and there's a handout in the back which showed you which questions went under that domain. And it's also, I have it in this presentation. Teaching and learning, safety, interpersonal relationships, communication, and in the staff zone, leadership around the building. And that is a mirror of the school climate survey that we did 2 years ago. So if you look at this, for students in grades 3-5, some of the questions under institutional environment are things like, I like my school, it's clean, the school has enough space, I like to go to school, I feel like I belong there. And if you look at the graphs and charts, you're looking for generally positive responses. Again, these are averages. So you have the 11 elementary schools plus the early childhood center, early childhood center isn't here because we only surveyed students in grades 3-5, and you'll see that the responses from our kids in grades 3 through 5 are generally positive. They are in the agree to, strongly agree category, and the averages put you squarely in the positive range. That doesn't mean that there isn't work to do there, but it is something that moves generally to the positive. Teaching and learning. Again, questions like, there are enough computers, my teacher helps me set goals. When I do a good job, my teacher tells me, my teacher notices when I need help. And again, our students in grades 3 through 5 are very positive about their school experience for the most part, and they feel good about their schools. Safety. Everyone knows the rules. I feel safe in the different zones of the school. Students at this school follow the rules. The consequences for breaking the rules are fair. And again, our elementary schools see this in a very positive light, again, on the average. Interpersonal relationships, I apologize for the size of that print, but things like, I have friends, teachers and adults treat me fairly. There's at least one adult in my school that I can talk to when I have a problem. Students at my school treat me fairly. Parents at my school treat each other kindly, those kinds of questions. And again, here we see a lower average score, but generally, again, in that agree range on the average. Communication. Teachers and adults help me know what's happening at my school. And again, here, elementary school kids feel pretty good about that. Now we're looking at our 6-12 population. So we had a separate survey for students in grades 3 through 5, and then the secondary survey for students in grades 6 through 12. I like my school. I like the school building. My school has adequate, up-to-date computers and other technology. Students have many opportunities to get involved, and I would recommend this school to others. Questions along those lines. And here are our secondary schools. Top 3 are the high school, bottom 3 are the middle schools. And you see that those scores are generally positive. If you drill into the high school data, you see a lot more positive responses in terms of that. The averages don't necessarily show that. But, again, you have to look at the age and stage. Adolescence, the job of adolescence is to be a little more cynical. But it does present a lot of work for the staffs to dig deeper into these numbers and come up with ways to make a difference here. Again, I apologize for the type, but it's on the domains handout in the back. Teaching and learning, things like, there are high expectations for teaching and learning at my school. Students at my school do their best even when work is challenging. Students at my school think it's okay to cheat if others are cheating. My teachers notice when I have trouble learning something and offer to help. My teachers encourage me to do well. My teachers give me extra help outside of regular class time. And again, here you see numbers that are moving toward the positive on the average and are consistent, again, with higher levels at the middle school and lower levels at the high school, again, on the average. Safety. If you remember, we're looking at this one pretty closely right now. At least I am, and others have been, because the first survey happened before Sandy Hook. So this is the first time we've asked kids about their feelings of safety since all the focus on safety post Sandy Hook. And so you'll see, students at my school are well behaved. I felt threatened or made to feel physically unsafe by an adult. I've heard students being insulted, teased, or made fun of. I've seen students spread rumors through social media. So here we were trying to gather the kinds of things that students are feeling about their own safety at school. And there are more questions, lots and lots of questions on safety. I feel safe in my classes, hallways, bathrooms, gym and locker rooms. Adults at my school apply the same rules to all students equally. And our responses, again, here are something we need to consider and think about as we move forward in trying to improve the overall safety and climate of our schools. Interpersonal relationships for students 612. This is about how students feel about each other and treat each other, as well as teachers and adults in the school. And again, you see, again, trending toward the positive on average, similar ranges between middle and high school. Communication, the communication of useful information in many ways, communicating important day-to-day information. I know how to report concerns about inappropriate behavior. So here are some things that, again, you'll see the direct lines between the presentation before and this particular question as the district climate team was looking at anonymous reporting at that point. And again, you see similar, generally trending toward the positive on average, communication for students. The interpersonal environment, this is the parent side, these are the parent graphs. So again, my child likes his or her school, the school is clean and well maintained. I'm proud to be a member of this school community. This school offers me many ways to be involved. I would recommend this school to a friend or family member. And here you see across all of our sites the parent perceptions about those questions. And you see a wide range, again, all of them trending toward the positive, but you see a wider range school to school on the parent reports. Teaching and learning, there's an excellent learning environment. Children are taught to think independently. School staff helps my child learn to manage their time. My child's teachers are sensitive to my child's individual learning needs. And again, trending toward the positive, a little bit wider range school to school than you saw in the student surveys, but again, generally trending toward the positive there. Parents feel pretty good about our schools in terms of teaching and learning. Safety, again, the questions are there for you. This is really, there were a lot of questions here about parents feeling comfortable discussing their concerns with staff, feeling welcomed into the building, feeling like students are well behaved, those kinds of questions. And here, again, safety is our lower numbers on the whole. They're still trending toward the positive, but there are certainly people have concerns about safety concerns in the post-Newtown era. Interpersonal relationships, I feel welcome. This school is sensitive to issues of race, gender, sexual identity and orientation, disability, socioeconomic status, cultural diversity. Our team of writers found, that these were some really important questions to ask about parents' perceptions in schools. And again, you'll see a bit of a range, but trending toward the positive. Parents feel pretty good about the relationships they have between their staff and themselves as they look at our schools. And this is, parents were surveyed pre-K through 12, so all parents were surveyed. Communication, the area of communication we thought was important, and looking at are they able to understand their child's progress reports. We asked about the access to Infinite Campus, really as a methodology to see if we could understand the feelings from that. School and staff administration effectively communicate with me. Collaboration and feedback are important. I'm aware of the educational goals for my child. I'm satisfied with the responses I get when I contact the school. They effectively communicate about school safety, and there are sufficient opportunities for me to receive high-quality feedback about my child's academic, social, or behavioral progress. And again, trending toward the positive with a little bit of a wider range school to school. But again, generally positive feelings on the parents who did respond to the survey. The institutional environment, these are the staff responses. Again, I like my school, enough space for teaching and learning. I'm proud to work here. I would proudly send my own child to this school. Again, trending toward the positive, but a wider range among staffs, school to school. Teaching and learning, I have sufficient resources. Faculty and staff at the school are given sufficient opportunities for professional growth. There are high expectations for students at this school. Teachers take responsibility for student achievement at this school, etc. And again, the numbers show that things are, on average, moving toward the positive. You know, I think one of the things to note in all of these graphs are small schools like the Walter Fitzgerald campus or the Early Childhood Center, because their number of staff, students, and teachers are so small, one person in one category, agree or disagree, moves the needle quite significantly, versus a single student or a single parent at the high school where you have hundreds of different people who might be weighing in. Staff safety, this is about clear rules, expectations, rules for behavior are consistently enforced. Faculty and staff at the school model expected behavior. Bullying and mean-spirited behavior among students is a problem at this school. And here you see, again, very similar to what we've seen with students and with faculty. Safety is an issue for everyone. Interpersonal relationships among the staff, and how the staff feel the school handles issues of race, gender, socioeconomic status, sexual identity and orientation, and the leadership team working collaboratively. So we thought it was important, our team thought it was important to take some information from the staff on their interactions with the leadership team and the teaming involved between teachers and administrators, as well as whether or not the adults in the school are treating each other with courtesy and respect. And you'll see, again, things are trending toward the positive in that range, in that realm. Communication. Do we feel like we communicate well with parents? Do we communicate well amongst each other? Do we inform, are people feeling informed about what's going on? When they have questions and concerns, do they know who they can contact? And do they know what to do if they witness bullying and mean-spirited behavior? And again, trending toward the positive with a range between schools. And finally, the leadership domain for staff. The types of questions we asked were, do teachers feel like they have an opportunity to participate in leadership roles at the school? Is the leadership team at the school setting high expectations for faculty and staff? Is the leadership team in the school setting high expectations for students and communicating those expectations? Is the leadership at that team holding all faculty and staff to high standards of behavior? And are staff comfortable speaking openly and honestly to the leadership team at the school? And here are the responses across all of our schools. Again, trending toward the positive with a wider range between and among schools. The next steps. Our next steps in looking at that is each of the schools obviously are digging into this data for themselves. They're looking at the kinds of action steps they're going to take to sustain what's good and move the needle toward the positive on things that need work. I think the good news here is that things are trending toward the positive, but there's plenty of work still to be done. And school climate work is really never finished. You're always looking to improve in school climate in order to help as a measure of improving achievement. The schools will be working kind of what I would call at the micro level. So at my school, here's what we're going to do. Our district team's next steps is to look at this at the macro level and say what district-wide things do we need, whether it be staff training, looking at evidence-based practices and sharing those with the schools, district-wide program kind of issues that might need to be developed. Certainly any updates to policies that relate to school climate and the student handbooks, perhaps a new look, a fresh look at the overall code of conduct might be something. And while the district climate team isn't a decision-making body, it could be advisory to the schools and certainly to the district level and the superintendent about areas we might need to move forward in. We need to review the Safe School Climate Plan for a number of reasons, which is also on your agenda tonight, and certainly looking at the Safe School Climate Plan beyond what the legal requirements are and seeing if any updates need to be made to that and what kind of updates might need to be made to that. So again, if you have any questions, I'm happy to respond, and we'll go from there. Can you turn that thing off?
I assume each board member may have a question, so out of deference to the individual who went last time, I'll start with Mr. Fattabine and just work up the last list that I had from first to last, if you will. For the public, the first presentation and the second presentation really have similar issues, if you will. And so after the board has conversation, if any member of the public wishes to make a comment on either the first or second presentation, you are welcome to do so. Mr. Fattabine, do you have any comments or questions that you wish to address?
Do you know the total number of responses received?
I do. I don't have that number off the top of my head, but I can. We were well up into the 90% for staff and students. We were at a lower percent for parents, individual parents. But when we went back and looked by household, we were able to see that, if we thought about it by household, we could have, even though it was anonymous, we saw that, if only one parent were doing the survey, then we could assume a higher rate, but we didn't have the data because of the anonymity to be able to check against a household. But I could get you those numbers. I don't have them with me. But the parent response rates were much lower than student and staff response rates, as they were 2 years ago.
Mrs. Gerber wants to make a comment on your question. Can she do so?
Yes, certainly.
No, I went to the website and printed out the summary reports per school, and at the top of each one, it says the number of responses. So you can go in there and see exactly how many responded per school. I mean, I guess if you have more than one child at different schools, then that might not, give you the exact number, but at least you can see per school how many parents, how many staff, how many students answered the survey.
Right. The other comment I'd make, not having reviewed this in great detail yet, that some of the averages where you indicate show a favorable reply and so forth, in the aggregate, based on some of your questions, a strongly agree may not be a favorable reply, and depending on what the question is, such as, do you perceive bullying at your school? If you strongly agree, that's not a good thing.
What we did was we assigned each question a 4-point scale, and it either went up or down. So
Right, no, I
sometimes
understand.
strongly disagree was a 4, and sometimes strongly disagree was with a 1, depending on the way the question was worded.
Well, they have to go into the data a little more, I think. I can look through it more closely, but the numbers in the aggregate may not be as representative, but in any event. Those are my only two comments based on seeing this for the first time tonight.
Yes, and all board members will be able to ask the staff questions as they delve into this more, and just send an email to Dr. Title, and he'll get the staff to address it. Mr. Convertito.
One, thank you for the obvious volume of work that you and the committee did. Just one really quick question. Was there any single area or single question responses that you and the team thought needed to be addressed? I understand the aggregate responses are
In
good.
the aggregate responses,
but was there
no.
anything that,
There were
singularly
some
stuck out?
questions in different locales that I think have raised at least yellow flags, and in some cases red flags, that teams are trying to dig deeper into the data to better understand. So there are some areas in some schools, it becomes school dependent. But I know that there are questions at all of our schools that our teams are grappling with, about how either parents or students or staff felt, and are trying to engage dialogue with their school climate teams, which have representation of all, but also with their faculties, with their PTAs, and they're thinking about this information and trying to delve into the kinds of programming or kinds of things they might need to do differently.
Will we see those in the climate plan rollouts?
When each school has to have a domain in their school improvement plan related to school climate. So the task right now is to review the data and determine what their next action steps are, and then that'll be reflected in their school climate plan in that domain.
Okay. And given that it's one data point, again, how do you weight that?
I think it's information, but I don't think we can call it a trend. I don't think we can say that that things are either moving in the right direction or the wrong direction. So we say this is what our community responded to on the day they took this, on the weeks.
My example would be when you talk about, middle school children or students developing relationships with staff, and you're given the survey basically 4.5 weeks or 5 weeks into the school year, they really don't have the opportunity to develop that. So, I mean, we're looking at it as a whole
That's
picture.
part of our district climate team's
Okay.
plan for what's next, is to think about the feedback we received from folks about maybe I'm not able to answer the questions yet, maybe we need to go back and rethink when we give the survey.
Okay.
Maybe that's a question that we need to ask to get more valuable data. So that's part of the conversation that happens at the district team level about what our next level of work is.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Llewellyn.
Thank you very much. A couple of comments. One is, I think it would be helpful to see the data in smaller buckets. As you went through, I noticed there were quite a few questions that would fall into your, what were there, 6, 7, 8 major buckets there. So it might be helpful to see it broken down a little further, because I think what ends up happening, stuff gets whitewashed. In other words, you're looking at averages, so your averages are always going to be, I mean, if you looked up there, rarely did we see it drop below 3, and rarely was it ever above 3 point something. So I think that we lose a lot in the wash. Is there a report that exists kind of between this and between, the lowest level data?
No, what's out on the web now and what I have now are the averages
Right.
and the raw data for each school by question.
Got it.
Which I think allows people to drill into
Yep, no,
just
it
what
does.
you saw.
Right.
I don't have another reporting mechanism that would be, at least one that I can configure right now, that would be kind of a middle road.
Right.
That's why we posted all of the raw data, because I thought if they were interested, or they thought they needed to drill down a little deeper into the distribution, which I do think tells a better story.
Right.
Than these aggregate graphs.
Right.
But these were similar to the graphs we looked at the last time out, so I wanted to make sure people did have that kind of big picture average.
Right. I think maybe going forward, adding a standard deviation or something along those lines out to the right of the bar would tell people whether all of your responses are here or if they're here. Because in looking at some of the raw data, the responses were here.
Right.
Now, one of your comments you made was that the students, if you looked at elementary, they were favorable, and then as adolescents came, kids changed a little. Do you think that the staff responses should be comparable across the schools, or do those?
I mean, do I think elementary teachers mirror their children more than secondary teachers?
Do I think that elementary teachers' views should be not dissimilar to middle school teachers' views, which should not be dissimilar to?
It's hard to say, because it's a singular data point, so it's hard to
Right.
see if that's
Yeah.
actually a truism or not.
I guess it's intuitive, right?
Yeah, it's hard to say yet.
Right.
That's a hard question to answer yet.
Okay.
Mr. Llewellyn, if I could comment
Please.
on that point?
Sure.
If I recall, and correct me if I'm wrong, the scores from 2 years ago, in 2012, it seemed as though the students in elementary school were more positive,
Correct.
as were the teachers and the parents, and the students in middle school were less positive. and the parents and the teachers kind of tracked that, and when we got to high school, it was the, if you want to call it cynical, but it was the lowest scores, and indeed, the parents and the teachers were lower scores as well. So I don't know that the scores from 2 years ago that the teachers tracked across the whole district, they seem to track by that level.
By the same category.
If you looked at those line graphs, they were similar, but again, I hesitate to compare 2 years ago to now, given the difference in the instruments. But
Right.
you're right, that the graphs looked similar.
Okay, and then I guess my last question is to follow up on one earlier about the school climate plans that you had mentioned. When are those going to be out by the individual schools? Is that a near-term or far-term?
Those go out, I believe they're due again, the updates to the school improvement plans are due in the fall? Yes. So they have this semester to dig into the data, think about action steps, look at that information, and then in the fall, those would be published again for the next level of work.
Okay.
Yeah, one of the reasons we're going to hold back a little bit on this is that because the district, we're hoping that by June, the district has a district improvement plan that we're working on. Want the schools to have an opportunity to mirror that in their school improvement plans as well on the academic side. So merely makes sense for them to hold back sort of finalizing that till they see what comes out of the district improvement plan, because we want them to be aligned.
Yeah, I understand from a macro level. I think from an individual school level, I noticed there were a couple schools there that were kind of, one way or the other. Some of those should probably be working right now at their internal building.
Yeah, I think they're all working on it now. It's just they may not publish document, but
Okay.
Believe me, I think 10 minutes after the survey window closed, Andrea was getting questions from principals, when can I get my data? They're very anxious to see it.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Mrs. Gerber? No questions? Ms. Carnell? No questions? Mrs. Maxon Cannelli? All asked. All asked and answered. Mr. Patton?
Forget if it was Mr. Llewellyn or Mr. Fadabing that we're talking about this, but in terms of, I think it was Mr. Fadabing, in terms of how you said that a strongly disagree might be a 4 or a 1 depending on the question, and it was things like, sorry, I can't read the tiny print this easily.
Bullying is a problem at my school.
No, I meant, okay.
You would have a strongly agree, get a 1.
Right.
And a strongly disagree, get a 4. I love my school building. A strongly agree would have gotten 4 points, and a strongly disagree would have gotten 1 point. So that's how that worked.
Right. Under teaching and learning, you've got the it's okay to cheat if other students are cheating line, which that kind of
Strongly
stuck out at
agree
me,
one.
and gotcha.
So the label at the bottom of the chart isn't exactly right. Really, it's the 4 would be
It's 4.0.
strongly positive.
Right.
3 would be positive, as an indicator. So that's maybe the better way to think about it, so that, you can't cancel out, if somebody says bullying is a problem at my school and they say strongly agree, you don't get 4 for that, you get 1.
Right.
So these averages represent the more positive responses, the longer the line goes.
Right.
That is consistent.
Okay,
The
understood.
labels are a little confusing that way. I can understand that.
And I've been poking my head over at Ms. Lynn McCormick had printed out the responses by question, and it's great that we have that data separate because, like Mr. Llewellyn said, sometimes there's some things in a category and there's a couple of things that might just kind of stick out, and you might want to not just look at the average and look at those specific things. So I'm glad that the principals, headmasters are really interested in seeing that. I guess my other question is, since this is the first time we had to do this on our own, right? We had the kind of national survey that we had done before, and we're for several years where we had many years to compare data to. Going forward, maybe this is a question through the chair to Dr. Title. Are we going to continue using, tweaked, of course, this particular survey that the team developed? And by the way, extremely comprehensive, far more than when we were discussing the cuts to do this than I ever expected, so bravo.
Yeah. Well, it's the question we have to grapple with, and the state requires this to be done every other year. And also the state seems to have an interest in specific questions being asked. Yeah. So we may have to, whatever instrument we do use, we may have to tweak it anyways, because the state is taking a more interest in this than you might think. So at this point, I'm probably leaning towards using the same survey again, but we may need to add some questions to it because, again, I think the value is that we then would have the comparative data, 2 years. I think if we go to a different survey, you may be able to go back to 4 years ago, but you're going to lose the comparison to now. And I think the team did an amazing job of a very comprehensive set of questions. And, looking at it, they may say some questions where they're duplicative and they can remove some questions, and some additional questions could be added, but there should be enough to compare year over year. And let's face it, the hard work on this has been done by our team. We don't have to start over. So I'm leaning in the direction of staying with the homegrown one, but perhaps tweaking it and perhaps looking at a different time of year. Because I have to tell you, I was trying to answer for my sixth grader, a month into school.
I received feedback from a parent who's
Yes,
also has
I
another
commented
role
on
in the
that.
district.
How am I supposed to know the answer to this, Andrea? Right? So it's one thing about having a kid in the system. You experience all this firsthand, and then the staff here never hear the end of it. So I think that was something that we may need to look at. Maybe not doing it in the spring when people have sort of mentally checked out for the year, but maybe you want to give people at least a half a year to get the lay of the land. But I trust this team to make good decisions, but I think at this point I'd be leaning towards staying with this for comparative purposes and for fiscal reasons.
The only thing I would say for your consideration as we move to the next 2 years is that there are many, many, many schools, districts in Connecticut who are now using the National School Climate Survey that we used 2 years ago. And so that might also give us another, not a comparative data point against other like school districts. So
If we
that
were to go
might be
back,
something to
you're saying.
consider. Using a valid and reliable instrument that's also being used by other districts might give us that another way to look at school climate in comparison to other like districts. And so that
Yes.
would be the only thing I would think. Otherwise, we built it already. We don't need to build it again.
Right,
But
and
that's
that-
something that people might want to consider.
That's my worry is, okay, well, yes, we saved some, thousands of dollars, to
20,000.
20,000. I was going to say, I thought it was 30, but okay, it's 20,000. So we saved $20,000, and in 2 years from now, I don't want to see that just because 1 year we decided to save $20,000, we're going to chuck this whole thing, that not only all the work that you did to create it, but really the data that we got from it, because you can't shove it into the national survey. So
See how Andrea and I disagree on this? We're just playing out our roles right in front of you, just to see that everyone is not in lockstep with the superintendent.
Lovely.
Okay, so do you have any other questions, Mr.
No,
Campbell?
I'm good.
Mrs. Lou McCormick?
I found this very interesting. Yeah, and it was particularly interesting to see the difference between how staff responded versus versus the parents and versus the students, and the schools are also very different. And actually, probably the bigger the school, the more robust the information, I would imagine, but also the different the environment. So it was kind of hard to see. But I guess I wanted to understand, because clearly there's always percentages next to the strongly agree, disagree, strongly disagree. But where do you see the cutoff being around as to where you say, okay, this is a problem area? Like, if we see 20% disagree, strongly disagree, meaning a negative response, is that a flag? Or is it, something like, where is that?
When you're looking at this data, you really, it really is kind of question specific, where you start to
Wonder.
put up yellow flags or red flags based on the data.
Yeah.
Certainly, if you saw a piece of data, the question about cheating, right? And you saw that 45% of your students thought it was okay to cheat. That might raise a
Right.
raise a flag in terms of
Yeah.
our whole issue. Teaching children about ethics. You might want to think about that.
Right.
If you look at 50% of the students don't feel safe in the bathrooms. You've got to consider that.
Oh, yeah.
If 5% of students, and you have 17 kids
Right.
in your building, then you've got a whole nother set of
Just wondering,
circumstances.
like, when you start hitting the 20-25%, I would guess a yellow flag starts
I
getting
would say the
thrown
flags
out.
start to wave, and you have to at least consider it in terms of, other like questions.
Right.
But there is no definitive cutoff where I say, do something, we have to have an action step related to this one right now.
Right. And then I guess one other question. There are two questions in here that had really high disagree, strongly disagrees, but I don't really understand what the question was getting at per se, so I'm wondering if you can explain. When it says there are clear rules and expectations for behavior at this school, and then rules and expectations for behavior are consistently enforced by all.
Well, it's important that students and faculty understand what the rules for behavior are, right? That what
does
the
that mean?
expectations for behavior are. And it's also important to understand that if we have rules for behavior, that we consistently apply those rules to all students. That there isn't a differentiation between some people are disciplined for this and some people aren't, because that would be seen as a negative. If the students don't feel like that the behavioral or code of conduct is fairly applied to all students, then that's something we all need to consider as a faculty, because that's going to result in kids
But if
testing limits
this is
more.
for staff. Is the staff answering on behalf of how the kids are behaving, or are they talking about rules and expectations for behavior for themselves at
For
the
all.
school?
There are rules and expected behavior for staff and students at schools.
Okay.
And so are those rules do we know what they are, and are they being fairly applied to all?
And this is for everyone, not just for the
everybody.
staff?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, yeah, okay. All right, and then my last thing is, you said the school climate plans are going to come out, and will they be presented to us? Like, will you link kind of the plans versus the results that you got to show that, look at the stuff we've highlighted, and this is how we're addressing it?
Yeah, that would be in the school improvement plans. There'll be a section about the results of the survey or whatever the data was that led to the action
The
plans.
action, yeah, because that would be great, having that.
That would be the easiest way to do it,
Yeah.
but really, that's up to the schools. That's the most important thing in there is what are the action steps? What has the school identified as the priorities? There's a mound of data to sift through it. What are the most important takeaways for our school? And what are the key actions we can take that will give us the best results right away? So there's lots of things you could do. They need to sift through it and figure out what the priorities are.
So
And those
we'll
would
be-
be reflected in the school climate plan.
So we'll be going through
I
the
mean, in the district, school improvement plan.
Yeah, so we'll be doing the district, and then we'll see the school climate summaries? Is that how this will work?
Well, you'll see the district improvement plan, because it's being worked on right now. You've seen parts of it already. And then the schools will each work on their own school improvement plan, which is essentially needs to align with the district's improvement plan. And part of the school improvement plans is school climate and how we're going to improve it. So you'll see it when we print the school improvement plans.
So-
That's when you'll see
So
it.
we will get presented the school improvement plans?
Yeah, they'll all get published on the website, and we can, whenever they're finalized the next time around,
They'll be
just as they
presented
are right
here.
now.
I just want to make sure that we're going to be presented here, or is it just going to be a passive?
I don't know.
It's on the
We haven't-
website if you
we
feel
haven't
like
gotten that
looking at
far.
it, great. Okay.
That's a next year discussion.
So we don't know if we're going to discuss it.
Any further questions, Mrs. Lou McCormick?
No, that's it.
No, okay. One comment, and then I'll, after I make my comment, I'll ask you to introduce, I see some of your committee members are here, and I think it would be appropriate to ask them to stand, introduce them, and say thank you to them. I took note of some of the scores of the Walter Fitzgerald campus, and I'm hopeful that the redesigned staffing pattern that we put into the budget this year will help the district address those in a way that perhaps prior to that budget support, they might not have been able to be as aggressive. So I see a direct link between that decision and the scores, and so I appreciate that. I think all of us on the board have a personal, as well as a board interest in this particular subject, whether in my case it was my own child's experience, or in board members it might be a neighbor's personal experience. This is on the agenda because we want to make sure that both parents and students and all of the staff in the district know that we take this seriously and consider it important. Could you introduce your committee?
Now, would members of the school climate district or building school climate teams, if you would stand.
Now, I know some of your names in here, so stand. Julie, you've got to stand.
Lenore Campbell and Julie Gottlieb, they were instrumental in writing this survey, so thank you, ladies.
Okay. Thank you very much for the presentation. We will, and so now we will take public comment on either of the two topics that we discussed under presentation. Anybody wish to come forward? Anybody wish to come forward on either of the two presentations? Seeing no one, thank you very much. On to item 6A, approval of bylaw amendment. The recommended motion is that the Board of Education approve the bylaw amendment to Article 6 per enclosure number 1. Mr. Patton, are you ready to introduce that again?
Yes, for hopefully the final time.
So you have to say you move that? No, just say you move it.
Yes, I
Okay.
move.
Is there a
item-
second? Mrs. Gerber, a second. Mr. Patton, any comments that you wish to make about it?
It's all been, yeah, it's all pretty much been said before of the last 3 or 4 months that we've gone through this. I'll invite board members if they have any questions that Mr. Wallen was not here last month that have not been asked before, please.
Mrs. Gerber, as the seconder, any comments? Board discussion. Mr. Fatterbean.
I'll reiterate my objection to this motion at this time. I feel that certain controversial board amendments have been made, and for the same body or the same board that made those controversial amendments on a split simple majority vote to now change that same board to now change the rules, I think is inherently unjust, inappropriate, and in some instances, I would say even mean-spirited to impose upon future boards, as well as this board, by what apparently may be a simple majority vote, to in the future require a two-thirds vote to change the bylaws once again. I would prefer that a new board, a new sitting board, if they so choose, to make this amendment, a proposal to make this amendment and require two-thirds and hopefully pass by two-thirds. So that's my objection to this. I don't think it's an appropriate and fair thing for this board to do. So therefore, I'm not going to support it.
Any other comments of board members? Mrs. Lou McCormick.
I ditto that, and I would like to make a motion to lay this on the table. Is that the correct motion? Postpone it indefinitely.
You wish to make a motion to postpone indefinitely?
I'll second that.
Mrs.
Correct.
I guess I heard Mr. Llewellyn first, so therefore Mr. Llewellyn seconded. Motion to postpone indefinitely. Shall we take action on that motion? We ready? Okay. All in favor of the motion to postpone this motion indefinitely, please raise your hand. Mrs. Lou McCormick, Ms. Carnell, Mr. Fatterbean, Mr. Llewellyn, all opposed? Mr. Patton, Mrs. Gerber, Mr. Dwyer, Mr. Convertito, Mrs. Maxon Kennelly, the motion fails 4-5. Any further discussion? Mrs. Maxon Kennelly.
Just one brief comment. I've heard Mr. Fatterbean say that before, and I actually found it a compelling point and gave me pause. But ultimately, what makes me support this was the very first statement that came out of Mr. Fatterbean's mouth, which was, and I have to paraphrase, I cannot quote, but that this bylaw is a good idea, that this bylaw is true to Robert's rules, and that it is worthy of being a bylaw. I appreciate his argument about this body, but ultimately for me, the bylaw, the worthiness of the bylaw itself is the reason for my vote.
Any further comments? I have three, and then eventually I'll get to public comment. Mrs. Lou McCormick, you've already spoken, so if I can go to Ms. Carnell, and then Mr. Patton, and then Lou McCormick. Okay,
I'd like to defer to Chad for last comment.
okay, fair enough. Mrs. Lou McCormick. Then Ms. Carnell, and then Mr. Patton.
I've said this before, but I'll say it again. The way I read the original Robert's Rules of Order, which I always go back to because that is the spirit of what I believe Robert's Rules was trying to accomplish, is that a majority vote for the entire membership allows amendments of bylaws. If you have a quorum, you require 2/3. And to change the rules for amending, it should always require 2/3. So I would say that if we want to put this change in how we make rules for amendments, meaning how we vote, then this particular vote should require a 2/3 vote as well.
Ms. Carnell.
Needless to say, I agree with Mr. Fatterbean and Ms. Lou McCormick, but that's my question, that I don't understand how we can attempt to pass this 5-4, and yet we're trying to pass something to change it to 6, at least 6. That doesn't add up to me. Why aren't we asking for a 2/3 vote to pass this? Can you explain the reality of why we can accept a majority vote to vote on this, and yet we're asking to change the amount to a 2/3? It boggles my mind. And if it's your amendment, I'd like to...
That's right. We could change this to the entire membership if we wanted to at whim using a majority, and I think that is not what was intended.
Mr. Patton?
I just want to finish one last thing. I know that he wants the last word, but depending on what he says, I'm not agreeable to that.
That's quite fine.
As long as board members raise their hands, they'll be recognized. Mr. Patton?
I'm not sure who I should respond to first, but I'm sitting between the two of you. To Ms. Carnell's point, the original intent of this amendment a year ago was because, according to our current bylaws, we are already in violation of this rule because our bylaws state that we adhere to Robert's Rules of Order, and Robert's Rules of Order states society should adopt rules for an amendment of its constitution, bylaws, or rules of order adapted to its own case, but always requiring previous notice and a 2/3 vote. To Ms. Lou McCormick's point, I've talked to, I can't tell you how many dozens of parliamentarians, chairmen of boards, town officials, et cetera, since this started a year ago. And she is entitled to her opinion, but she is misinterpreting what the intent of number 68 on Robert's Rules is, which is part of what I just read. And that is, if a board does not, if boards need a quorum to take action, any board. So if a board traditionally doesn't always have a quorum, then things need to be adjusted. That is not the case in things like town boards and our Board of Education, where probably 95% of the time we have a quorum. Additionally, part of the beginning of this number 68 that I'd handed out last month also states that the other reason to have a 2/3 is because, or I should say, while you would only have a simple majority versus a 2/3, is if you didn't have rules already in your bylaws to amend your bylaws. So that is also not true in our case because we already have a bylaw that states how to amend bylaws. To Mr. Fatterbean's point, I will just refer you yet again to the timeline that I had handed out last month, which goes through the process of how all board members were encouraged to submit amendments since it was a new board, and whether it's tradition or just courtesy that all new members should have kind of, take a shot at changing the rules. We basically all took our turn, and it took a year to do that. And a year later, the chairman had said that this was going to come forth at the end, and we've been trying for the last 4 months. It's the end to do this. So I don't know what else we would do. I don't see it as unfair if you're saying it's unfair now, it was unfair a year ago, or actually last spring when we did the other amendments. So obviously, I'm in full support, and I'm done with this.
So, Ms. Cornell, to answer your specific question, our current bylaws permit amendments to the bylaws on a 5-4 vote. And so therefore, under our current bylaws, a 5-4 vote is all that is required to change any of the bylaw provisions there. And that's that's the current rule in our bylaws.
So I just want to make sure I'm following you. The current bylaw is a 5-4 majority, and we'll call it a majority, correct? Or 5-4, it's the
Requires a
same thing,
5-4
right?
vote,
It's the
yes.
same thing. And if I understood Mr. Patton correctly, he said, but historically, it's been done at a majority, not on a 2/3. Then why do we, to this date, have a majority and not 2/3?
For changing a bylaw or to amend a bylaw, Robert's Rules specifically states for roughly 100 years, they have not changed in any edition.
Excuse me,
that-
no, I know you read that.
No,
Then
no, no,
we-
I know. That to change a bylaw, you should have a 2/3 vote. At some point in the past, this board changed that to a simple majority.
This existing board?
Not this existing board, some previous existing board. The Fairfield Board of Education. So, right, at whatever point in the past that happened. However, we changed a bylaw a few months ago to update the fact that our bylaws follow, or our board operates under the rules of Robert's Rules of Order, Edition X. And so by saying that, if we're conflicting, we have conflict within our own bylaws. You can't say we follow Robert's rules on one bylaw, and then the other bylaw says to change a bylaw thing, we have a simple majority, which is not what Robert's rule says. So that was the origin of changing this a year ago. And that's why I still stand by it now.
You finished at the moment?
No, I'm not finished.
No, just at the moment. Mr. Llewellyn.
Yeah, could someone remind me what the vote was, please, for removing public comment on general topics that were not put on by the chair?
I don't have that number in my head.
I think it was 5-4, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
If you say so, I'll take your word for it.
I appreciate that. And then what was the vote for, let's see, what was the other restriction that was just placed on us? Oh, asking for information that needs to be voted on by a board. What was that vote?
I think you know the answer to that question, Mr. Llewellyn. Are you asking redundant questions, or?
It's a rhetorical
Because you're
question,
looking
actually.
for
It's a rhetorical
information?
question.
So the reason I'm asking rhetorical questions is, as the chair, you get to put things on the agenda. You chose to put this one on the agenda last. I don't think that it should be passed.
Thank you very much. Ms. Cornell, do you want to make any final comments?
Oh, yeah, no, it's not final. I just want to understand from Mr. Patton, you said something, one vote, one amendment is one way and one of Robert's rules is another? You said one was done by 2/3. so I'm trying-
Two sections in our bylaws say things that technically conflict with each other. One says we observe Robert's Rules of Order as our method of operation, and one says to change our bylaws, we have a simple majority, which is not what Robert's Rules of Order says.
I'm not sure I'm following your first point in observing Robert's rules. Are these for two different issues?
Nope. The boards operate according to however they say they want to operate. And if we say we want to operate according to Robert's rules, including you recognize a chairman has agendas and calls motions and how to, challenge a motion and all that type of stuff, that's all Robert's Rules of Order.
Ms. Cornell, Mrs. Lou McCormick has her hand up. Do you want to defer to her?
And then we'll come back.
Okay.
So then I have to say that if in fact we amended to Robert's Rules of Order and we agreed that we were going to use the 11th edition last, then does that not supersede the majority rule bylaw? Because we said that we were going to do that edition and then that was going to be the rules that we followed. Then in fact all the bylaws that we just approved by a majority vote should no longer be valid because we should have been following 2/3 vote to approve all of them.
The bylaw currently talks about 5-4 referencing some other vote and some other bylaw provision doesn't change an existing worded bylaw. Ms. Carnell, did you want to make a
Can we
follow-up?
see a copy of that? Because I'd like to see that before we vote. And in addition, and I'm not sure this is the right way to do it, do we have Robert's Rules book here?
Yes.
Okay, can we pull what we're talking about, please? And then the second point, and I'm not sure this can be done, is I make a motion, and I don't know if I can do this now, thank you, that this, to amend this, to put this forward, it has to be done on a two-thirds, meaning you have to get two-thirds of this board to agree that this can be up for vote.
That's not true, if I can interject,
But
Mr.
if
Well,
Mr.
she made a
Patton-
motion, I second that.
Motion.
Oh,
Mr. Patton.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize that, sorry.
That would be a, Mr. Patton, that would be a motion that is out of order because it is changing a bylaw without notice. This bylaw, and essentially it is abrogating the motion that isn't currently on the table. So if you want to make a motion, you'd have to make a motion that says eliminate two-thirds and keep the words "a majority." That would be the proper way to ask to amend the motion.
Okay.
Do you have a clear point of order clarification?
Go ahead.
That motion was not to amend the bylaws. The motion was to require a two-thirds vote for this motion.
Yeah, correct.
Incorrect. The motion on the
That would-
table, the motion on the table is to amend the bylaws by striking the word "a majority" and replacing it with two-thirds. That's an amendment that is on the table by motion, formal motion. If you want to change that, then you would have to amend the motion, and if you don't like the two-thirds, I think the proper step that I would rule is to
don't think it's
make
not
an
an
amendment to strike the word
Amending the
two-thirds
bylaws.
and remain with a majority in the bylaw amendment. So you'd be amending the amendment.
Okay. That's what I'd like to do, amend the amendment where it's a majority vote.
Who seconded it? Okay, it is moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the amendment to change it from two-thirds back to a majority? Mr. Convertito? We're discussing the amendment where Ms. Carnell made an amendment to change it from two-thirds back to a majority. Any discussion on that amendment to the original amendment? If not, all in favor of the...
One second, because we were looking in Robert's Rules. No, I have it.
It's the same thing, but yeah, this was...
Through the chair to Mr. Patton, I'm not sure I understand because they use the word majority and they use the word two-thirds. Majority.
That, what she's looking at is,
Cornell's looking at.
I'm sorry, what
Ms.
Ms.
Carnell
Carnell
is
is looking at is the section, and this is basically the same thing that I handed out last month, where it says here, I just lost it again. Basically, she said the difference between a simple majority and a two-thirds. And a simple majority, it basically is saying that if you don't have any provision in your bylaws already to change or to amend your bylaws, then to amend your bylaws, you should stick with a simple majority. If you don't, and then you should add a provision in your bylaws to how to change amendments quickly. But that is not the case here, because we have a provision in our bylaws, because we are already amending that provision that says how to amend a bylaw. So, and I guess to Ms. Carnell's point, maybe this will help clarify. To my understanding, Mr. Chairman, please, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, a bylaw or something that is in a bylaw that is already in there supersedes or can supersede a Robert's Rules of Order thing. Correct? In other words, that's why the simple majority was able to be put in here to begin with and changed, because while we're saying we're adhering to Robert's Rules, at whatever point some board said, well, we don't have to do that for this particular thing, and the board can really do whatever it wants if it votes. Is
I would
that,
answer it this way. The bylaws are the ruling document for this board, and no other document can change those bylaws unless this board changes the bylaws. So the ruling document at the moment is to approve changes on a 5-4 vote. So are we ready to act on Ms. Carnell's amendment?
I have one more comment.
Please do.
So on that, if you are in fact trying to get the spirit of the 2/3 vote requirement to change bylaws, then you should be uncomfortable making this amendment without a 2/3 consensus from this board, because that would be, I don't know if hypocritical is the right word, but it would be a contradiction of the spirit under which you are trying to move the bylaws towards.
I would remind a couple of board members that one of Robert's Rules' basic tenets is to debate the principle, not the personality, to debate the motion and not the motives, and perhaps there have been a couple of comments made tonight that question the motives of individuals here. So if I could, make sure you stay on the principle and the motion for comments.
That is a pure observation and not a comment on individuals.
Some of the adjectives used. Ms. Carnell.
Then, forgive me, I'm a little confused. Why was this one last and the other two were put up before? Because these were all, I believe, amendments we were voting on. If we were trying to amend it to a 2/3 according to Robert's Rules, why wouldn't that have come up first so that we passed it and then the other amendments? How could we vote? I'm really confused. If it is what Robert's Rules said, then how do you put those other two amendments up first? I would really like an explanation, because it just doesn't make sense to me. On one hand, you're sticking to Robert's Rules, and then the other two amendments were changed not by what Robert's Rules said. So I find that where I really can't understand. So maybe you can explain if you don't mind.
A year ago, when I think 8 different amendments were presented by different board members, I guess I could have put the amendment on the table to make amendments require a 2/3 vote, which would cause those who made amendments, in my belief, to say, well, you're changing the rules of the game just to prevent us from presenting amendments. And so I felt that those who had made amendments were doing so under the rule that currently exists, which was a 5-4 vote. So a year ago, I put it last, and I had planned on taking action on it, but at Mr. Llewellyn and Mr. Fatabean's request, a correct request, since there were 2 outstanding amendments that were still under consideration, one by Mrs. Lou McCormick and one by Mr. Llewellyn, we also deferred action on this rule to allow both presenters to be able to work under the existing rules of a 5-4 vote. And indeed, those 2 amendments were eventually brought forward. Those 2 amendments were eventually defeated on a 3-6 vote. And so therefore, that leaves us now with this last amendment, which, following the same logic, rather than change the rules of the game on those who may have wanted to make amendments, we said, let's get those done and then address this last. It's the same logic that was used a year ago that worked to Mrs. Lou McCormick and Mr. Llewellyn's benefit, and it's just the same logic.
So in that case, then I'd have to say even more strongly.
Well, can I interrupt for a moment? We are straying from the amendment to the amendment in terms of the debate. You know, the debate is on the amendment to the amendment, not necessarily on the process of the agenda and whatnot. Comments on the amendment to the amendment to go back from the 2/3 suggested back to using the term a majority.
I'll wait till the next go.
Mr. Llewellyn, do you have a comment or not?
I do, but after the amendment.
After we take action on the amendment. Any further conversation on the amendment to the amendment? If none, all in favor of the amendment to the amendment, which is to strike the word 2/3 and to maintain the words a majority. Everybody clear on that? All in favor of the amendment to the amendment, please raise your hand. Mrs. Lou McCormick, Ms. Carnell, Mr. Fattabine, Mr. Llewellyn. All opposed? Mr. Patton, Mrs. Gerber, Mr. Dwyer, Mrs. Maxon Pinelli, and Mr. Convertito. The motion fails 4-5. Any final conversation? We seem to be following a pattern, so I think
I'd like to
at some
call the
point-
question.
Mr. Llewellyn had his hand up first, so let me address Mr. Llewellyn and Ms. Carnell, and then perhaps we can take a vote if we are allowed to.
Call the question before the vote.
I am looking back at the old minutes. Just as a point of clarification, were the two bylaw changes to eliminate public comment and to restrict board members' access to information proposed last year, or were those put in to
I think you
a
also
recent
know the
meeting?
answer to that question, Mr. Llewellyn.
So let me just state, I think
Yeah,
that,
please.
given that the spirit of everything everyone's talking about and going back a year is based on the fact that people who had things out on the table at that point were going to be allowed to operate under those rules. And yes, Mr. Patton's bylaw change was there, but what was shoehorned in were eliminating public comment as well as eliminating board members' access to information without a vote. So that is where I think the agenda was manipulated for the benefit of a 5-4.
I've
And that's
explained-
why I think that we should put this on the table, or
Well,
just
we've already taken
redact
that
it.
motion, and so you cannot put another motion to table. I've already explained the rationale, so Ms. Carnell, do you have a comment?
I have a few things. If Mr. Llewellyn checked the minutes, and that's how they are, then that goes against what you said. This was not put in sequence because two other amendments were pushed in or added. So again, I don't follow your sequence to what you just said about the change of the rules 1 year ago, and you generously put it last. But there was two more amendments
Well, this is
added.
orchestrated sequencing.
Please, I remind board members to using words like orchestrated.
Apologies.
And whatnot,
Apologies.
are really not appropriate. Ms. Carnell,
I
please
apologize.
finish. Thank you.
So I guess
know
then
if
the
they're not
question is, following what you've said, I don't understand where these two other amendments came from. And I think that's why I also want to say that I totally agree with Mr. Fattabine, that why change it in the middle of a board? Why not wait till election? So maybe you can explain both those issues, where those other two amendments came
I
from.
don't think I have any further explanation than what I've already stated.
But what you said is incorrect if I'm following you.
I don't
If
have
I
any-
said if I follow you. You added two amendments, but yet you're saying you listed them accordingly and putting this one last. But if I'm just trying to understand, but you added two more amendments to the list. Is that correct, Mr.?
I don't
Chairman?
have any further explanation than the one I've already given you in terms of the not changing the rules of order simply to, until all board members have had a chance to submit their suggested changes and then put this last. I have no further
No, I
explanation than
understand,
those
and
two.
I understand your logic, but what I'm asking you straightforward is, did you add two more amendments to the list after those 8 were, I think, submitted? I think it was 8.
I have no further explanation than the one I've given you.
Okay, but you're still not answering the question. Did you add 2 more amendments?
And the answer is yes.
So then help me to understand the
I don't
sequencing.
have any further explanation, Ms. Carnell, than the one I've given you as to how I sequenced them.
So 2 more were added.
Any other comments that board members wish to make? The answer is yes, 2 more were added. Mr. Patton.
I'll make one final comment, is that according to the old rules or the new rules, with prior notice, any board member can make an amendment to a bylaw, and now I am going to call the question.
Take 6 to call a question, Mr. Patton. You want to just move to the motion or not?
Let's call the question.
I withdraw my motion.
Draw your motion. Other comments from board members before we take a vote? Okay, the motion is in front of you as originally presented. The appropriate line is by the affirmative vote of 2/3 of the entire membership, and reading, of course, the rest of the amendment that is in enclosure number 1. All in favor, please raise your hand. Mr. Patton, Mrs. Gerber, Mr. Dwyer, Mr. Convertito, Mrs. Maxon Cannelli, all opposed. Mrs. Lou McCormick, Ms. Carnell, Mr. Fattabine, Mr. Lou McCormick. Mr. Llewellyn.
There you
I'm,
go. Point of order. Actually, I disagree with the ruling and believe that it should be two-thirds vote.
The vote has been taken
And I'm
on
ask-
the motion, and it passes 5-4.
That's fine.
Okay?
And I'm making a statement. Point of order.
No, a point of order is to question a parliamentary procedure.
And if
you
I
have
could
to-
finish,
Excuse
please.
me, and you have to question it at the time the ruling was made.
I'm not questioning that.
Not commenting about it afterwards.
Point of order. I disagree with the ruling and believe that it requires a two-thirds vote. I'll be making a motion to rescind this in the future. Thank you. Please have the record reflect that.
Okay, so now we will move on to the next item, which is approval of policy 5516, another easy discussion. The recommended motion is that the Board of Education approve policy number 5516, students with healthcare needs, life-threatening allergies, and glycogen storage disease management. Ms. Maxon Cannelli makes the motion. Does one of the committee members wish to second it? Mr. Convertito. Mrs. Maxon Cannelli.
Everybody have it? Okay, I will apologize in advance for those of you who are already convinced of the merits of this policy, or at least fully understand its rationale. We have, as a board, continued to hear from people just learning of this work, and so I would be remiss if I did not grab this educational opportunity to run through a few aspects of this policy. I have referenced multiple times that the work of the policy committee for these past 12 months has been working to fulfill both the letter and the spirit of the Connecticut State General Statute. I don't think I should assume that everyone knows what I mean by that. First, regarding the letter of the law. As I laid out before this board last fall when the policy first came before you, every aspect of Section 10-212C has been fulfilled by this policy. We have addressed the requirements of education and training, procedures for emergency events, the creation of individualized healthcare plans, and protocols to prevent exposure to allergens. Second, regarding the spirit of the law. I will go right to the prevention section of the policy, as that is the area on which most public comment and emails and conversations outside of here have focused. You may reject this interpretation if you like, as I have not, in fact, had a conversation with the sponsors of the Connecticut state legislation or with those who voted for it. But it is my belief that the spirit of this legislation is focused on giving children equal access to the education that we provide, which is in compliance with national legislation. Because, in fact, without the rules that we have laid out in this policy, we are explicitly denying that very access to a growing population in our schools, and quite possibly risking their lives as well. That is not hyperbole. There's a reason this is called the policy for life-threatening allergies. If you take issue with my statement regarding the risk to life, I have a long list of people whom I would suggest that you contact. How does this policy work toward preventing an exposure to a life-threatening allergen? And by the way, please note my use of the phrase work toward. There is nothing in this policy that can guarantee the actual level of safety that the parents of these children work toward every single day. We have specifically focused on peanut and tree nut allergens, as these cause the most allergic reactions in classrooms, a national statistic which is further supported by our own internal numbers regarding our students' currently diagnosed life-threatening allergies. The district will be researching and distributing a suggested snack list to help parents comply with the no-nut snack policy. The creating of food-free zones, the mandating of cleaning procedures, and the required removal of clearly non-compliant foods such as peanuts and peanut butter from middle and high school classrooms, so that the chances of accidental ingestion or tactile-based reactions are significantly reduced. The district-wide elementary school stipulation of food-free celebrations, a practice already in place at some of our schools, and the restricting of food consumption and serving to the outdoors or cafeteria by PTAs and other community organizations. Again, that list of 5 items is how we are working towards preventing exposure to life-threatening allergen. And while I have been the recipient of many thank yous and other supportive communication, I would like to focus on some of the arguments that the board has received in opposition to this policy, focused especially on this prevention section. Let me be very clear, these objections are precisely the reason, or at least a very good part of the reason, for why this policy has taken 12 months. If there were a silver bullet of a solution out there, I assure you we would have found it. If there were a means of fulfilling the letter and spirit of the state statute to which no one objected, I would be leading the charge in its support. In fact, there are many legitimate points that have been raised in opposition to this policy, but not one of them takes into account the philosophy and mandate that we must work to ensure access to the education for all of our students in a manner that does not exclude and does not cause a level of anxiety and stress that compelling research shows most decidedly impacts a child's fundamental ability to learn. In my points that will now follow, I am directly referencing comments which have been emailed either to me or the board, but I will not be referring to any writers by name. First, the notion that you cannot have a celebration without food. Some of our schools are already doing this. Our board-approved wellness policy already stipulates that this is what we should be doing. I cannot help but add that school nerd that I was, with thousands of glorious memories of my public school education and its celebrations, I can't recall eating in my classroom ever. Nor does this impact our children's socialization, another argument we have heard. They have recess and lunch, which both directly address that. And if our students require food to be engaged in the classroom, I quote, then in all seriousness, I understand why childhood obesity is epidemic. But perhaps most importantly, can you imagine a world where every child, except the minority student, were allowed to take part in a classroom food celebration? How about the student in the wheelchair? How about the student on free and reduced lunch? How about the student who doesn't speak English? I think each of us would find each of these situations morally repugnant and indefensible practice for any school. Yet that is precisely what happens every time a parent thinks it's a good idea, in innocence, ignorance, or whatever, to send in some boxes of Girl Scout cookies for a classroom snack, or a tray of cupcakes for a birthday. Second, the notion that the use of wipes is time-consuming, expensive, and provides no guarantee. These are points with which we have grappled, but let me first run through some possibilities that the policy committee either rejected or were not willing to make into policy without further and more extensive input. We have contemplated the total elimination of snack time, the moving of all snack time to the cafeteria, having parents buy allergy-safe snack from Whitson's, the mandating of fruits and vegetables only as snack, the creation of a definitive safe snack list off of which all snacks must come, the teacher reading of labels to ensure parental compliance with the policy. Please note that all of the steps above could be done at no cost to the district. In lieu of these steps, and knowing that until we have parents and students fully understanding the means by which they can endanger another child, we settled on doing what we could to clean the allergen from the classroom, which is the student's primary learning environment. Does that take time? Yes. Do I think students can get more efficient at a practice which is recommended anyway by every Board of Health, as a simple means of avoiding the flu and other contagions? Yes. Could it impact classroom instruction? Yes. And hypothetically, if it does so at a level that interferes with the delivery of curriculum, that is a conversation that we must eventually delve into. But I remind you, that was hypothetical. We already know for a fact that students are being deprived of classroom instruction time due to trip to the nurse's office, home, and emergency rooms, sometimes for several days because of their exposure to allergens, which we are required by law to prevent. Third, the notion that students will in any way be restricted in middle and high school from seeing their teachers. I bring your attention to the fact that the high school element of this policy doesn't take effect until next school year, when each and every student will have a lunch block. Regarding middle schoolers, they may still have access to their teachers for help during lunch. We have not deprived them of eating in the classroom. They simply are not to have a substance with them that's clearly non-compliant that could directly negatively affect the access of another student to that same teacher and classroom. This policy drives home the need for education, awareness, training, compliance, and safety with inclusion. It obeys and respects both the letter and spirit of the law. And I should add, I do not for a minute think that this is the last version that we will see of it. This board or another future board will grapple with it again as the community and district work to find an increasingly better solution.
Mr. Convertito. You seconded it, so you are...
I'm good.
Okay. You don't want to follow that, do you? Do you have anything further that you want to comment about relative to the motion itself?
There are two small amendments that I had wanted to put out there. The first of which is on page, and this is an oversight, which again, no matter how many times you read something, you miss it. Page 6, in the prevention section, letter C, number 2. This was just an oversight. The multidisciplinary team shall include in the pre-K to 12 management plan, which had been referenced earlier and is mentioned up above an A, and so that is a typo.
Why don't we take action on each one independently?
Well, that's just a friendly
It's a friendly
amendment.
amendment. Mr. Convertito, as the committee member. Ms. Carnell? Is that by unanimous consent? There is no objection to that? Then
I'm going to be a pain.
Yes.
Listen, if you object, then if you object,
Sorry.
it's not by unanimous consent, and we'll have to take a vote. Okay?
Sure.
Okay.
I want mine.
Any discussion on the addition of the word 212? The number
To be more
12.
precise, dash 12.
Dash 12. Mr. Patton.
By the self-contained outline, where that is C, under Foods in School Elementary, and then you're going to add pre-K to 12 in the management plan under the elementary section of prevention. So
Is that a question?
Well,
Yeah, I
that,
think
it's more of a
that's a
comment that
question.
I,
How do
that
you-
you've got an inherent conflict there, and in
You
terms of.
understand the question?
Not at all. We're required to put together a pre-K to 12 management plan. While this is under prevention in schools for the elementary, the plan must indicate what snacks are available in the elementary school. It's not contradictory at all. It's
Okay.
just the correct title of the plan.
Yeah.
Right. If you
You're
look up in the
comfortable
first
with it,
line of
Mr.
A.
Convertito? Okay.
All right, I see what you're saying. It's in A, so you're just titling it the same thing.
Correct.
So it's grammatical.
It's consistent.
That's all I had to say.
Does that mean that you're withdrawing your?
Yeah, I'll
unanimous-
withdraw my
Okay.
objection to the
We have unanimous
consent.
consent to make the change, so the main motion will be this policy as changed to include the pre-K-12 on page 6. You have a second one.
Second, we've discovered that a term that we have been using in policy, and unfortunately I cannot find in my notes, I cannot trace its source. The phrase we have been using, protein-soluble hand wipes. We wish to change, or I would put out there the idea of changing it to wipes. I genuinely am not sure if that's a term we're using within the policy committee. I have heard from staff that they are actually having difficulty finding something by that name, that when they do a Google search on it, they come up with the minutes of our meetings. So, yes, and that was not the intent. As I said, I cannot remember the genesis of
so
that.
to get
about my
the,
new business?
you wish to, a friendly amendment to delete the words protein soluble on page 7 on number 5, and protein soluble on page 7 from number 6.
Correct.
And you presume that those are the only two places that is referenced.
Correct.
Mr. Conditito? No problem with that? Ms. Carnell?
Just to be clear, no, there's not a problem, I just want to be clear. The genesis was that certain wipes, not all wipes, take away the oils on the
Right.
desk.
But
that
it-
was the genesis of it. So I think what we were trying to do on the policy committee was be explicit about what type of wipe would work.
Not all wipes are antibacterial, so that's my other question.
But,
is
but
it
can I
generic?
interrupt for a moment? Are you assuming that the or other approved cleaning agent directs the administration to find something that is approved for its intended use?
Right. As I looked on trying to look on the nationally recognized websites, they actually refer to them as commercial wipes. And so I think that was an internal, you're absolutely right that that was the intent, but I think when we started calling it that, we actually thought that that's what it was called in wide circulation, and in fact,
It's not.
it is not.
You are still unanimous
Yes, thank you.
We know what the intent is. We just need latitude to find the right product at a good price.
Is there any board member that, by unanimous consent, wants to object to the removal of those two words? Mr. Fatabeen.
I think we should be clear of what the facts are. Are protein soluble wipes different than other wipes? And to what extent are they necessarily required to remove the allergens? I think you have to, I may disagree with it in the end, but you have to be clear on what the facts actually are instead of just sort of
So
brushing the
perhaps,
facts aside to make a determination.
so perhaps Dr. Teitel could comment about he and his staff's research, and then based on his comment, Mr. Fatabeen, I would
Yes.
suggest that you either say that you don't have unanimous consent, in which place we'd have to vote on it. Dr. Teitel.
Well, we've been doing a lot of research on wipes. I've been doing a lot of research on wipes. Mr. Cullen has been doing research on wipes. Our purchasing person, Mrs. Burns, has been doing research on wipes, all looking for the term protein soluble, talking to our vendors and so on and so forth. That's not a term that's used in the industry. So it's possible that if that stays in there, we might not be able to find something. And so it's just become a real problem because we also have restrictions. There's also rules in Connecticut about certain ingredients not being in wipes because we have a green cleaning protocol and so forth if students are going to use certain wipes. And it could be that some of the wipes that are protein soluble in their effect aren't allowable because what makes them protein soluble makes them dangerous in other ways. So this has been, chasing down the right product, quite time-consuming and a little bit frustrating. And so I think the safest course of action is we know what we're trying to do here. We just need a little more leeway in finding a product that's cost-effective, that's easily distributed, that can be stored. We're talking about essentially a lot of wipes, and they're going to be stored in classrooms, and they're going to be thrown away, and so forth. And we just need be able to cast a wider net, because that term is not really a term of art that our people in the field recognize. I guess that's the best explanation I can give to it.
So, Mr. Fatabeen, back to the question of unanimous consent. What is your desire? I'm patient. You're fine with it? Thank you.
No objections.
Any other objections? If not, so ordered, that the motion will be a main motion, striking the words protein soluble from item number 5 on page 7, and striking the words protein soluble from item number 6 on page 7. Anything further you wish to comment on?
No, I just eagerly anticipate questions.
Comments from the board on the main motion, the policy as presented. Mrs. Gerber.
Well, again, I guess since we just were talking about the now just regular hand wipes, do we have a sense of the cost of having to buy additional ones? I mean, because I know that we have some that were budgeted for, but this obviously goes above and beyond that. So do you know any ballpark figure? Or I know we had discussed in the last meeting the possibility of having hand washing instead. And I didn't know if there was any kind of, piloting efforts to see how long it would take. I know we've had a lot of snow days and delayed openings that may have made it difficult, but just do we have a sense of which way you're leaning, which one makes more sense, and just any costs associated with this?
Right. Well, we did, I think I mentioned at the last meeting that we were going to do some trials in the elementary schools with a variety of grade levels to see how this plays out. And clearly, using wipes, this is not pre-snack, because the pre-snack is not part of this, really, right? So pre-snack teachers might do hand washing or whatever they normally do that's not impacted by this. We're talking about what happens afterwards. And what we found was that the most efficient way to get the kids back on task and back into the curriculum was to use the wipes at all the grade levels. When teachers did hand washing, if there was a sink in the room and it was a relatively small number of kids, that might be able to be done fairly efficiently, and maybe with a lot of practice, maybe that could be just as quick as wipes. But right now, a lot of rooms don't have sinks. Kids would have to, had to go down the hallway, line up. Some of our classes, in 25 kids. So we found that using the wipes really minimally impacted time on task, I guess, for regular curriculum. Mike, that's a fair statement? I mean, we're talking like 30 seconds to a minute. I mean, relatively modest. But depending on the availability of water and soap and where it was and how many kids there were, the trials indicated that it took anywhere from, 8 to 12 minutes longer to line all the kids up and do that. So I think we would want to, obviously there could be some teachers that are really good at it right now, and they could zip it off in no time. But we would probably recommend that teachers start with the wipes, and again, as the kids get better at that, they'll be quicker as well. So that's what our trial, so I think there was some concern that would this take away from instructional time, and I think our answer is, if the teachers use the wipes the way it's described in here, it would not impact instructional time. So in terms of the cost, I think I'd given you figures last time, approximately, say in the $30,000 range for wipes based on what we're currently using. Don't know if what we're currently using will fit the bill or something very close to it. So that's a ballpark number, but some of the wipes can get very expensive. But right now, I'm going to, work with that figure as a working number. But upon further research, if we find out that the only really one that works and meets all the other standards is substantially more expensive, I guess I'd have to report back to you about that. But at this point, I'm going to work with a $30,000 figure based on what we're currently using and buying them in bulk. And those types of wipes, I mean, believe it or not, I have to think about things like, if you buy wipes like at home, we had props for this, but they come in these canisters, they take up a lot of space, a lot of plastic. They're hard to store. You pull out 3 at once. All the problems with that. We've been doing this in the office, so for amusement purposes only. So there's the whole canister thing, or there's the kind that open up, right? The tubs right? And those are also, again, a lot of plastic, storage or issues. We're talking about needing, say 2 per student in a classroom. But there's some, and some that we're using right now that are like in flat packaging. They're much more compact. They come like 82 a pack, and they store easily. We wouldn't have as many, and those are less expensive. So if those will do the trick, that's what we're trying to shoot for. So we've got some logistical things to work on all of this. That's why we need sort of the widest latitude on this to try to find the best possible product. But right now, I'm going to work in that range for the marginal additional cost for doing this.
Any other questions, Mrs. Gerber?
Yeah, well, I guess just then the question being that, let's just say it's $30,000.
Right.
That's $30,000 that you'd be able to get from somewhere?
We wouldn't have any choice. It's the board policy,
Okay.
right? Yeah, I mean, it'd be, right, we don't have it in the budget this year.
That's what I'm
Right.
saying.
Yeah, we don't have it in the
It wasn't in our
budget. Right.
So you're saying, though, that
That's an annual cost. I didn't hear about when the elementary piece of this would go into place. We've got a lot of professional development to do as part of all of this as well, so I don't know about if there's an intended start date for this particular thing this year. I was thinking about what would the impact be on next year's budget. I was not thinking about what the impact would be on this year's budget. That depended on when we actually started doing it. But obviously, there's only a few months left. It wouldn't be as great. We have not budgeted for it. But obviously, if that's the policy, then we will have to adjust, that's all.
I think Ms. Cornell had her hand up, and then back to...
May I follow up, though?
And then, wait a second, and then back to Ms. Maxon-Connelly and Mr. Fattabine. If you wish to defer to Mrs. Maxon-Connelly. Fair enough.
Just a reminder through the chair to Dr. Title, you are welcome at any time to come back with a recommendation of fruits and vegetables only.
Right.
And it can come from you.
Yes.
And I'd be happy to then say, all right, this is now a budget issue, an impact of too great and insurmountable an obstacle, and this is now our new option. We have a whole list of non-financial impact options. So just putting that out there.
Thank you.
Well, I understand, but I'm
Thank
just,
you. Ms. Cornell.
we will comply with whatever you pass.
Through the chair to Dr. Title, I may be wrong because I'm not as well versed in wipes as you seem to be.
I am
but-
an expert. Roofs, boilers, wipes, I do it all.
And the weatherman.
And next
And
November-
weatherman, exactly.
And next November, there'll be a workshop at CABE.
That's
on
exactly
this.
right. I think I may have to do that.
But in serious.
No, we put time
No,
into this.
I-
I don't want to, I don't want to make fun of it because it's a serious issue, as, Ms. Kennelly said, and we did spend quite a bit of time researching this, and it's not as easy as it sounds, I guess is what I'm saying.
No,
Like
I-
everything else with this policy.
And
Ms.
no,
Turner.
seriously, and I know the policy committee and a lot of parents have definitely committed a lot of time to this. But in seriousness, in looking for these wipes that may do what we need them to do, have you called the company that we have the wipes from and asked them if they make such a thing? Because somebody has to make these wipes. No, there's a reason I'm asking.
No, we did. We called all the vendors, the suppliers, and, we did get some price ranges, but, we had to look at, again, there's some inherent conflicts in here that we have to resolve, which is that, this may work really well. I actually found a study online about this, and they spread peanut butter on, and certain wipes worked and certain wipes didn't work, and so on and so forth. But some of those that are really effective are hazardous for other reasons, and therefore we can't use them. So we did get some pricing on some other wipes that were substantially more. I think the high end was would be about $100,000. We've got to make some decisions and look at the different options. But believe me, the first people at Tom and Jan and the maintenance and, we've got some that we use in the district right now. Okay, because we do buy them. They're used in the ECC. They're used in some of the SSC classrooms. I mean, we do have some. We have a contract, and we're looking to see whether, if those will do the trick. Those are, be on the modest end. But we just need some time. I really want to get some input from maybe Sands Cleary or somebody with a health medical background. I really don't want to be making this decision without, advice from, our local medical experts.
Ms. Carnell, anything else? Mr. Fattabine?
I guess I want to take a little different perspective of this and maybe go to a little more fundamental question. It's my understanding that in the elementary school classrooms, the allergen, in essence, is being eliminated, the peanuts and tree nuts.
I think it's being significantly reduced.
Significantly reduced, meaning you're not going to permit.
There's nothing in
absent a
here that's
violation.
guaranteeing, there's nothing that's
Right.
guaranteeing.
Right. So my question is, if you're going to eliminate, in essence, in the classroom, the allergen, is it necessary then to go through the extra step of wiping everything down after they eat? It's after the, I mean,
And that's a
the
question
que-
through the chair to the chair of the policy committee.
Right. I would think that you want to be as you want to provide as clean an environment as you can, but there are no absolutes. So the question is a balance. It's a balance if your decision is to eliminate the allergen in the classroom. Then do you have to take that extra step? Is it worthwhile and cost-effective on balance to take the extra step of having to wipe everything down for something that may not exist, or all probability doesn't exist if the policy is enforced as it is intended? That's my question. Maybe it's not even necessarily.
I know it's a very good question, and I would very much like to answer it. What I would hope is that as education takes root, not only in the staff, in the students themselves, in the community at large, there would come a point in time where this cleaning component of it wouldn't be needed. But what we know right now is that we are, in fact, as part of this policy, not asking for the reading of labels, not asking for closer discernment of what an individual student might be eating, and so that as the education is taking hold, we fully anticipate that there are going to be mistakes made by those, whoever they may be, parents, guardians, relatives, that there will, in fact, despite the policy, be substance coming into the primary learning environment that are, in fact, allergens. And minus all of those things that we rejected as a committee as means of controlling the food that was in there, we're going to take the education piece of informing parents that this is the policy. We're going to give a suggested snack list. We're going to educate them on the dangers of this, of what things that they can look for. But because we are not, in fact, controlling that food, we have to have the cleaning protocol because we absolutely, with complete confidence, anticipate that the allergen will enter the classroom despite the policy.
Any further questions, Mr. Fattabine? And Mr. Llewellyn, you next?
Couple quick points of clarification,
No,
please.
Mr. Fattabine, any further? No, Mr. Llewellyn.
Perfect, thank you. September 1st is the rollout day. Is there a reason we don't want to start this earlier?
Well, actually, the only place I believe where it explicitly says that is on page 7, and that is because we are making that in conjunction with the high school schedule. That to do it, so that's specific, right now that's where that effective date is relevant to there.
So only the high school? So will the elementary schools begin this sooner than?
That's the idea, but I would say, I think everyone in the committee understands that there's still a rollout procedure, even if it doesn't have an effective date. I mean, there's education pieces to be put together. There are training modules. There are communication pieces.
In terms of eliminating the allergen?
Absolutely. I mean, this is going to take steps to do that, even though it's effective immediately, and some of these steps can be acted upon immediately. I don't think, if anybody is anticipating that all of this is tomorrow in place, that's certainly not, I think, the opinion of the committee, if I may speak for them.
But you'll be nut-free in the next several months, or?
Well, I guess we're moving towards that, and certainly with the anticipation that as of the new school year, yes, but we want the steps on this to get started now.
Okay. Thank you. And in terms of,
You might want to make sure that you use the microphone for the,
thank you. In terms of the wipes, it's mandated, I know we're back to this again, but if a classroom doesn't have a child that has an allergy, are they still mandated?
Yes.
They are, okay. And then,
And I would like to follow up on that, which is, that's also part of the request that got us started on this at the end of last winter, which is that idea of a desire for consistency across the district.
okay. And then We use the term in here, a district-wide multidisciplinary team. Is that going to have parents and?
I would certainly think so.
I just didn't know if it was defined. And then the last question is, are we currently in compliance, or is this policy going to bring us into compliance with state statute?
Our administrative regs are in compliance, yes.
Our policy's not?
Our policy is very vague.
Okay. So we need this to get us
Yeah,
into
I mean, if you look at the first page in black, that is our current policy.
Okay. Thank you.
We've slightly expanded it.
Okay. By a page or two.
Yeah.
Any further questions, Mrs. Lou McCormick, followed by Mr. Patton?
I don't have a question about wipes. I have a question. I did read some concern from parents regarding the application of this to middle school and high school, and how that might impact, you know, kind of special meetings and such that students have with teachers as they eat lunch, and meetings that kids might have between themselves, and how we are going to consider that, you know, with our whole policy of food not in the classroom.
Absolutely. And granted, my statement that I started with was 2.5 pages long, so this was explicitly referenced in there, but it was 2.5 pages long. Regarding the high school, that's also one of the reasons why we have that September 1 rollout, because once students have a designated lunchtime, it's expected that that's one that they would have the time for lunch, and if they are using that lunchtime, which is being carved out of another class, to meet with a teacher, they still should have in that 30 minutes time to go and eat and come back.
What if they don't? Because 30 minutes isn't that long. Like the lunchroom's all the way in the basement, teacher's all the way on the second or third, whatever, I don't know if floors there are. But that's a long hike to eat, have lunch, and then run up. I mean, if they want a full half hour with a teacher, they're going to have to just eat with that teacher.
And if they want to eat a bag of peanuts with that teacher, then they are denied that right.
No, I'm just asking, can they eat other foods?
Yeah, this is not eliminating food in the classroom.
Just nuts.
That's correct.
Okay.
And even then, we use the phrase clearly non-compliant. We are not asking a teacher to read a label. We are not asking a teacher to discern if there's almond extract in the frosting of a cupcake. But a bag of peanuts, a bag of peanut M&Ms, a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, no.
So they can eat in the classroom, they just have to wipe it down?
No,
Not in the high school?
not in the high school.
Oh, so they can just
Wipes have
eat
not
and go.
entered the realm of middle school and high school. All that we are asking of faculty, and in all fairness, middle school and high school, that was part of the dialogue that came in later with this, and so this is very much intended to have very low impact on faculty who have not given us a great deal of input, but what we think was a natural progression of the policy as a whole, given the statistics that we have for peanut and tree nut allergies, is that a clearly non-compliant snack, which we had a clear vision of, and I hope we don't have to define further, again, the bag of peanuts, the bag of cashews, the peanut butter and jelly sandwich, that substance simply doesn't belong in the primary learning environment.
Understood. Can I ask a clarification? Maybe you don't know the answer to this. How about something that contains sesame oil or sunflower oil?
We are looking at clearly non-compliant snacks, but of course, what you are raising is an important issue, and that's where what we have to accept, as much as we would have loved to have added another 5 pages of rules for this, that's going to be part of that education piece, you know, and that hopefully educating students that these are substances that can pose a danger, a life-threatening danger to a classmate, that will be, in raising that awareness, that would be reduced. But this is as far as we were comfortable going at this time.
So nut-free foods will be allowed in the middle school and high school classrooms? Nut-free? Yes?
Correct.
Any other comments or questions? If not, Mr. Patton.
Ms. Lou McCormick had my question, so thank you for that discussion. You know, but I agree with some of her comments in that yeah, I know my own daughter in middle school has had you know, several opportunities where she had to make up an assignment, do whatever. And, you know, in middle school, they have a lunch period, and she took her lunch period to go to the teacher, and she had to eat her lunch in the classroom, and it's fine. And she does occasionally eat peanut butter and jelly, so that'll be an interesting dynamic going forward. And I wasn't sure if, I knew we were talked about no food in the classrooms entirely, and I know that's now gone, so that answers that. So the only other comment I'll make is I have had the pleasure now of being the liaison and now a member of the Board of Health, and had my first meeting the other night, and although it was not part of the agenda, I did, I wouldn't say grill, but discussed this with Sans Clear, the Director of Health, and Joanne Ryan, the new nursing supervisor, who I'm sure you're very familiar with.
Not enough.
Not enough.
This is Maxim Finelli.
But they concur with what you've done, and I guess the only thing that remains to be seen is that they are more than what's the word I'm looking for? They are excited to be part of, or at least be on the multidisciplinary team, to be invited to join those discussions in terms of advice and creating not necessarily the snack lists, but in terms of things like creating the communication protocols for the program across all the schools, because that's really their domain.
Thank you. I think we have, do you want to make a comment on that or not?
Just very briefly, one, I certainly thank you for bringing the issue up with them. Their input will be invaluable as we move forward with this. I do want to get back to that middle school. I want parents to know that initially we had been coming out with the idea of no food in the classroom in middle school and high school, and it was very much in listening to parents speak to the issue of how, especially in the middle school, that lunch period was used sometimes almost entirely with the teacher, and it was out of respect for that time that we backed off of that initially. That said, a student's need for access to a teacher for educational help could not trump the need for a student to have access to that educational environment that's free of, or as free as we can, in terms of preventing exposure to the allergen. And thus, your daughter will need to find a substitute for peanut butter and jelly if she chooses to use her lunch block in that way.
Thank you. Mrs. Gerber wanted to make a comment, and if I may, with the board's permission, after Mrs. Gerber's comment, then go to the public, and then back to the board. And then back to the board, okay? Mrs. Gerber.
Well, this is just to one other question or clarification with the food in schools generally. So where it says the non-compliant food will be removed from the classroom or restricted area, so that means that all teachers
Yes.
or guidance counselor, well, I guess they wouldn't be, I guess this is just classrooms, or?
Yes. Well, it says classroom or restricted area, which if that,
And is it a restricted area? I'm just thinking like in terms of meeting with your guidance counselor or something like that. Does that include, or is it purely classrooms? I guess that's just one.
No, it's defined.
It's,
It's defined in
wait, is
here.
it defined in here? I'm sorry.
no.
I think it's defined somewhere. You talk about libraries and stuff like that.
That's only elementary.
The food-free zones? Bottom of page 6.
Number 4.
No, that was elementary schools.
Yeah, but that's elementary.
The libraries now at the high school are currently restricted. There is no food in the libraries.
Right.
Sorry, the libraries at the high school currently are, there is no food in the libraries now. So there's a restricted area. And the regs that come out of the multidisciplinary team will probably lay out some others. So it's intentionally vague just to allow them to manipulate that.
And to designate those areas.
Right.
Page 7, 8B.
Right, got it. So then I guess, like I said, so then it will be removed from the classroom, meaning that all teachers need to be aware of this. And there's no label reading,
Right.
but at the same time, if someone walks in with a bag of peanuts or a peanut butter sandwich, the teacher would say, I'm sorry, you need to remove that. I mean, assuming that obviously this is going out to all students, and you would hope that in high school, middle school, they'd be more responsible for not bringing those foods into classrooms, but everyone will be on the same page based on the education component of the policy.
Correct. And again, also, this has the September 1, this explicitly has the September 1 rollout.
Right, so there's plenty of time to get everyone on the same page. Okay.
Also because of the high school. Ludlow doesn't have a cap, can't fit everybody, so they get to eat in the classroom. They have to.
Right,
So
but
that
again,
was
going to the whole meeting
Right.
with teachers during your lunch period,
Right.
which they'll still do even though there's room in the cafeteria, so just, yeah.
So if I can now to the public, any comments that people wish to make on policy 5516, please come forward. State your name and address.
My name is Rachel Kelleher. I'm the Family and Consumer Sciences Liaison for the town of Fairfield.
Make sure you speak into the microphone. Yeah, you have to kind of be close to it. For the-
Okay, I'm just used to shouting loudly. So my name is Rachel Kelleher. I'm the Family and Consumer Sciences Liaison for the town of Fairfield. And I would like to make the following statement with the support of the middle and high school family consumer science departments. One area that seems to have been overlooked here is the very large and flourishing culinary program which we run in the Fairfield schools. So each of the middle schools has a culinary department. Both of the high schools have a culinary department and a fully functioning restaurant. We already accommodate for students when we are aware of their allergies. Middle and high school students need to be able to monitor their environment and manage their allergies independently. As foods teachers, it is part of our job to assure parents of students with allergies that we will work with them to provide a positive, safe experience in culinary class. From time to time, this may mean that, despite best efforts, a child cannot eat a food we are making. But, again, as it is our job to provide a positive experience, there will always be an alternative. We work with students with allergies every day, including gluten, shellfish, stone fruits, dairy. We accommodate vegetarians and students with religious food requirements. I have a nut allergic student in my global foods class right now. Today, some students made baguettes and some made blackberry financiers. The student with a nut allergy obviously made the baguette. When an allergy is known, we differentiate our instruction to accommodate for those needs, as we do with any student in need of various accommodations. When there is a class with no known student allergies present, then we have a responsibility to teach our students without these limitations. By restricting any food that has the possibility of being produced in a factory that may have processed nuts limits many basic ingredients used in our board-approved curriculum and will compromise our program, a program which has produced a large number of students accepted at Johnson & Wales and the Culinary Institute of America. Current research states that nuts are one of the most nutritious foods and an important part of a balanced diet. Nuts are a whole food with an endless variety of culinary uses. One of our goals is to have students prepare whole foods in a healthful and flavorful way, to experiment with new and different foods, to prepare foods from many different cultures. Nuts are an integral part of both everyday eating and fine cuisine. We feel that we ought to be more concerned about teaching students how to navigate the world around their allergy rather than creating a figurative bubble for them to exist within.
Mrs. Kelleher, are you about to wrap up because you've
Yes.
exceeded your 3-minute time period?
One more sentence. I would be very concerned for a child who heads off to college without having had an independent experience with their allergies. The Family and Consumer Science Department strongly suggests that instead of a one-size-fits-all policy, we should focus on educating all students to be independent and navigate their own world.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anybody else wish to come forward? Please state your name and address.
Tricia Donovan, Fairfield. I'm not going to try and follow that up too much because I might get a little angry at the table, and I'll try not to do that. I understand that accommodations are always made. My children have successfully taken the culinary courses in the middle school, even though they have life-threatening allergies to all dairy products, eggs, peanuts, and tree nuts. In the middle schools, they do not use nuts in their program. There are students who are allergic to airborne particles. When you cook nuts, when you cook eggs, some students may respond to that. One of my friend's sons reacted to powdered milk that was used in one of the cooking programs. He ended up in Yale Hospital that evening. So there are accommodations that can be made, but let's not joke around and say kids need to learn to navigate. These kids navigate extremely well. And it's due to these kids' very good training by their parents, by their support group, by their community, that there aren't more accidents in our schools and in our communities. So let's cut it out and say that students need to learn. They learn every single day, 3 times a day, if not more, every time they're exposed to food everywhere they go. I would just like to address the cleaning protocols that were mentioned earlier. We must keep cleaning protocols even if we have food restrictions, because then we fall into that false sense of security land. We can never put our guard down, put our vigilance down. There will always be contaminants no matter where we are. That's why we keep our cleaning protocols. And we also must protect other students' life-threatening food allergies in terms of milk allergies. I know the most dangerous landscape for my children having dairy allergies was kindergarten room with Go-Gurts that squirt all over the place. You have to clean the surfaces and get the Go-Gurt squirt off of the surfaces, and as students share a common table in the lower grades, they squish them all over the place. And also, kids are now switching classrooms at all levels, even the elementary level. So we can't just say it's one classroom that has an allergen. When we're switching for math in different schools, when we're switching in the 5th grade level, when we're doing recess, we can't just say to a student, you cannot leave your classroom, because that's discriminatory. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody wish to come forward and please state your name and address?
Christine Vitale, 254 Vernon Hill Road. I have a middle schooler. She's allergic to peanuts, milk, dairy, all tree nuts, sesame oil. It was a very happy day in our house when she outgrew wheat. I'm very thankful for her teachers and the nurse and administration over the years who've kept her safe, but there have been instances at the peanut-free table, somebody spills milk, she's got allergies, she had to take Benadryl, wasn't anaphylaxis, but missed a day of school. I've really struggled following this with this policy. I think that this is a good compromise. I wish it didn't cost $30,000 for the wipes, but I thank you for your efforts in trying to keep all of our kids safe. I don't envy the job that you had. I ask the board to please support this. I think the cleaning protocols will protect kids like mine who are not just allergic to peanuts, that have anaphylaxis, she has sesame. That's, we're in the hospital, so thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else wish to come forward? Please state your name and address.
Tina Brown, 35 Quaker Lane. Just to sort of follow up with Mrs. Kelleher, I think it was a shock because for so long the middle school and high school wasn't in the policy, and other than those of us who do come to board meetings, the high school faculty didn't find out about it until 2 days ago. So I'm just hoping that she can be helped to see through this exactly how it would relate to the culinary department, and if it really did mean they couldn't use many of the products they use now. Because again, as she said, it would make a huge difference in what their courses are. So I don't think she was trying to be saying it was all on the kids. I think she's trying to say you're really limiting the courses that are offered, and how are we going to continue to offer those courses if so many things are taken out? I just think there needs to be a little more. I know Dr. Title has said there's going to be professional development. It's a little different for me to say I can't have nuts in my room as a snack, as opposed to saying you can no longer have this wheat or this flour or this pasta or whatever it is, and you can't use sesame oils and you can't use that. In a culinary arts department, it's a little different for them. So I just hope that that gets there so that, and as she said, she's the liaison, so she's the one who tells everybody else. And thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you. Any other member of the public wish to come forward and comment on the policy? Seeing, whoop. You beat the gavel, going once, twice.
Kelly Dunn, 205 Tuckahoe Lane. A lot's been said tonight, and I just hope that you mentioned a September 1 rollout, and I know that's, I think, more geared to the high schools. I hope it's clear how it's going to be communicated across the whole district, elementary, middle, high school, via Infinite Campus letter, PTA presidents, principals. However, it's just too important to not have that clearly communicated district-wide. I know there'll be a lot of questions. Thank you.
Anybody else from the public? Okay, back to the board. Mr. Fattabine, why don't you make less than 5 minutes worth of comments, and then I'll ask for a motion to extend the meeting. Mr. Fatterbean.
How often do I take more than 5 minutes, Mr. Chairman? It's an interesting number.
Virtually never.
I hope to keep to the same. I guess I just wanted to clarify and confirm that when you say non-compliant food, since only peanuts and tree nuts are the substances in which are being prohibited, non-compliant only includes peanuts and tree nuts, I would assume. Is that accurate?
You might want to say that into the microphone so that
Correct.
it's recorded. Yes.
All right, so the other allergens are not necessarily non-compliant. My other comment would be that at least at the high school level, I have some reservations of the ban at that point in time, or the elimination of peanuts and tree nuts in the classrooms. I would have almost said eliminate food in the classrooms, but that seems to be been debated and so forth. But at the high school level, I mean, I agree with the problem with the curriculum in the culinary arts classes, as well as at some point the expectation that we are also instructing students to enter the world when they leave the hallowed halls of academia, in at least our district. So to a certain extent, they have to be aware of their surroundings, and these kids in high school go all over the place. They eat at restaurants, they go to New York City, they're on the trains, all these places where they have to be aware as well. And I understand we have to have a safe classroom, but to some extent we also they have to have, or some expectation they're going to be safe in the world as well. And that's my concern at the high school level, whether we're being overly protective and not really preparing them as well as we should for their life in the future as well. And that may be not the best solution in my opinion. So that's my reservation with this policy.
Thank you. In looking at the balance of items, the only thing that is an absolute must is the Timothy Dwight educational specifications. The others could wait, but the first reading would mean that would push that whole process over. So may I ask for a motion to extend the meeting to 11:30 that might allow us to get through? Mrs. Maxon Cannelli, seconded by Ms. Carnell. My apologies again. Any comments? If not, all in favor, please raise your hand. It's unanimous. Now, the job is to beat that 11:30 time frame. Any further comments from board members related to the policy and the main motion? Mrs. Gerber, and then Mr. Convertito, and then I'll let you take the last quick response. Go ahead.
Well, I guess this is through the chair to Mrs. Cannelli. The culinary arts question, I was wondering if you'd be able to address that. So basically, we're saying that moving forward, culinary arts classes can no longer use tree nuts or peanuts?
Based in this policy, yes. One thing that was said in error, nothing in here have we been getting into the aspect of the manufactured on.
No, I understand that. I'm just, this is the first time it actually occurred to me that would include culinary arts classrooms. So, I mean, have there been any discussions about the impact that this could have on the curriculum, or is this something that modifications could be made? I mean, it's obviously not. I know there was something said about sesame oil and different kinds of flours. I know that's not in here, but
Right.
tree nuts and peanuts is in here.
Correct.
So that would be taken out of all of the culinary arts classes.
And here's what I would say to that. As we are communicating this policy and rolling this out, yes, that is what is in the policy now. But as I have also said, we absolutely fully anticipate that this policy will be coming back in the future as we find areas where it is flawed. Right now, if we're going to have equal access to the education for all of our students, that would include those culinary arts classes. And unless we are going to put in mandates regarding the cleaning in there after each block, we still would have the same issues of accidental ingestion, of tactile-based reactions. And so, again, in keeping consistent, we thought that this was still important.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Who else? I'm sorry, I lost track. Mr. Convertito, I'll make some comments, and then Mrs. Maxon Kennelly has a final comment, or did you have a comment as well? After Mr. Convertito, Mrs. Lou McCormick.
One, I just want to thank everybody who's worked on this for the last year plus. I won't mention them by name, but they know who they are. As far as the culinary arts program, I'm happy, with the caveat that if the administration, when they write the regs for this, can come up with a protocol that satisfies us and protects those students, then we can edit that into the policy. But I'd like to see the regs first before we change it. So I'll leave it up to the administration to work with the culinary arts staff to come up with a protocol that we feel comfortable with, and then we can go back and move and make a move on that.
Mrs. Lou McCormick.
I guess I'm a little concerned by the comment that the Culinary Arts Department only heard about it 2 days ago, which has given them very little reaction time to think about how it would truly affect their curriculum and if there are any alternatives. And therefore, I also feel uncomfortable rushing the process of pushing this through to then leave them in limbo as to what their curriculum is, to then say that, well, in the future, we can make an amendment which will then allow you to have some new curriculum. So it leaves the whole curriculum in limbo and a huge amount of uncertainty. And I hate to even think about extending this any further. However, this really gives me pause because I don't even know if there's a way that we can carve that part out from this current curriculum to then have a separate add-on to address the culinary curriculum at a future date, just because I don't know that I find that necessarily fair to, thrust that uncertainty onto that department without them fully acknowledging, digesting, and figuring how they can, if it works for them, or if they can deal with the peanut-free situation and they can adjust it very easily. But if they can't, do they have 2 classes? Do they feel, I just don't know the issues, and I hate to rush this and put that on them in 2 days.
Any other further comments, Mr. Llewellyn? And after Mr. Llewellyn, is there any further comments that people wish to make? Mr. Patton, Mr. Llewellyn, Mr. Patton. Thank you.
I guess through the chair, would it be possible to get an understanding of how much of an impact tree nuts would have on the Culinary Institute, just so is it half the recipes or is it 10%?
So through the chair to Dr. Title to his staff.
However you want to do it.
Is there any way to
I have no
measure that?
idea. Do you want to bring the teacher up?
Yeah,
Go
I did.
ahead.
That was what I was
Is there any
asking.
way to measure the
I'll just comment while she's coming up that I'm not sure that this has really been completely vetted about all the different possible impacts at the high school level. I think we're just seeing one of them.
do you have a response to Mr. Llewellyn's question? And do you understand Mr. Llewellyn's question?
Yes, you're asking. Go
So
ahead.
if we don't need to have the restriction of something processed on a plant, all we're concerned about is the number of recipes that have tree nuts or peanuts,
Yeah.
small or big.
Okay, so I would say that the initial basic culinary arts class, we could reasonably easily work with that.
Okay.
What becomes more difficult is the higher level. So right now with global foods, it's hard to teach, for example, Asian cooking without using a nut. And then we have the 2 restaurants in the high school. People come to us, they order food. It's hard to say, no, I'm sorry, you can't have pesto, you can't have this. We're self-supporting. We are running a business, and we're not running a nut-free business.
So the basic curriculum would not be as impacted
think that-
as the restaurant.
And the
higher-
20-level culinary classes.
Okay.
That's correct.
Perfect. Okay, thank you very much.
Is that it? Thank you very much.
Can I ask an add-on
So,
question?
Do you have any
As
further?
as a comment there, I think that we could pass this and put on a date certain agenda to have it addressed in terms of, creating an exception for the Culinary Institute. But I think that we've got to get something done. This has been bantered around forever, and I'm not sure our policy is in compliance with state statute.
Any further comments that people wish to make? Mr. Patton, are you, and then I'll make my comment, and then we'll go to Mrs. Maxon Connelly, and then we'll vote. Are we, okay? Go ahead.
Yeah, it sounds like I'm echoing what others are saying. As long as I'm not saying put on a specific date, but through the chair to Dr. Title, if in the next month, I don't think before our next meeting in 2 weeks, but, perhaps what are we in March? So the April meeting, maybe we could have some rough idea, either repercussions or if we, have to amend this, by the summer so we don't affect the curriculum for the fall. I know that's certainly not an easy thing, and if there's obviously other impacts, that affect the high school level, certainly I think that's got to be on our radar, before year's end. But I am in support of voting on this now.
Okay, so I'll just state that when Dr. Title feels that he has enough information to bring it back because of changes that need to be made, it'll be back on our agenda. But he needs some time to do the research, and it's hard, in my mind, to put a date certain on that because there's a school to run, graduations to get ready for, and secondary teachers to talk to, and there's a lot of them. So
Wipes to research.
and so I'll be guided by how quickly he can get that information and then bring it back to us. So apparently we are not finished. Mrs. Gerber, Mrs. Lou McCormick.
Well, I think in terms of the secondary schools, we do have that September 1st date, so we do have 6 months with which to figure out what, if anything, needs to be done in terms of the culinary arts courses. So for that reason, I support the idea of voting on it tonight. So just as a reminder, this isn't going to be in effect in the secondary schools until September 1st, correct?
Protected flood loan.
That's correct. That's a correct statement, correct?
Okay, I just want to
Okay.
clarify that.
So if I can make my own personal comments, I would not use vague, and I would certainly not say that our policy and/or administrative regs are not compliant. The statement is that they are compliant. Back in 2004, when the initial policy book was put together, the standard was a broadly written policy and the details in the administrative regs. And most of our policies follow that pattern. Of late, and I'm going to say over the last 2 or 3, 4 years, we seem to be getting more prescriptive in our policies rather than having those be in the administrative regs. This is just an example of that. So I wouldn't say, I wouldn't agree with the concept that our current policy and combined with our administrative regs are not currently compliant because they are. My initial concern, several concerns, was is this meet the legal tests? I applaud the committee for struggling with that and finding an answer that was comfortable both for them and for our attorney. I'm glad that the more broadly written policy allows for opening up the bid specs, if you will, for wipes. I'm happy to hear the statement that it says it's not intended to be immediate, that there is a recognition that it will take time to educate, to develop the documents and et cetera, and that the board is fully understanding that, and that it's not like tomorrow we suddenly are out of compliance because we didn't do all this work in 24 hours. Like Mrs. Maxon Connelly, I grew up with no food in the classroom, and in fact, if I had brought food into the classroom, I probably would have been in the principal's office in detention. So I initially thought, why don't we just simplify this and say no food? I've been convinced by various people that that probably is not necessarily today, but if that's what becomes necessary through administrative reg later on because of other things we hear, then I, for one, would not be opposed to it. On the secondary is probably the biggest concern I have, the inclusion of secondary with very little discussion among staff and parents and students, kind of advanced notice. But this afternoon, I was convinced on that issue I would not support the policy, but based on comments that Mr. Llewellyn has made, Mr. Patton has made, that we fully expect the staff to look at the impacts, and when there are negative impacts on the student experience in middle school and high school, that this board is amenable to addressing those negative impacts, and without, if I can add this, Mrs. Maxon-Connelly, and to the committee, without another year-long study of how to address those negative impacts. So I will vote in favor of the policy simply to move it forward and be done with it. I promised Mrs. Maxon-Connelly the last word. Mrs. Lou McCormick, you wish to make a comment.
I would agree with that because of all the work that's been done that we should pass something. But I would like to ask whether we could do this with the understanding that we will revisit the higher level culinary and the kitchen as part of the approval so that we are sure that this is addressed. I'm very concerned that as time goes by, we forget. And these things happen. So if we put it as part of our approval and we say that this will be addressed by September, we will have some sort of a agreed upon curriculum adjustment or whatever it is, recommendation, then I can support it. If we don't do that, I would suggest that we delay because rushing always has bad outcomes.
Thank you. The minutes will reflect what I mentioned, that we will put it on the agenda as soon as Dr. Title has an opportunity to get the answers to those questions. Any other further conversation? Mrs. Maxon-Connelly, the last 60-second comment.
Just a couple of random points. First, I thank the member of the public for helping me clarify what was an incomplete answer to Mr. Fatabeen regarding the purpose behind the cleaning. Because, of course, we do get so focused on peanut and tree nut. In fact, there are several life-threatening allergies and that our students have been diagnosed with, and cleaning was meant to address all of that as well. And so that was an incomplete answer on my part. And I can't agree more with another member of the public talking about the importance of communication. Communication and education is vital to this, to its success, to the compliance, to the cooperation, the accepting, and in fact the embracing of this policy. Those are what are going to help to achieve that, not mandates. And so we recognize what a vital role that will be, what a vital role the administration and the district team will play in helping that to roll out. Again, I believe the issue of real world and awareness of surroundings has already been addressed. And I also remind, in terms of the word to secondary staff, I'm sorry that it was not more clearly communicated to them, either by us or by central office staff. But I suppose there is that reminder that when there are certain school safety issues, there isn't always a heck of a lot of advance warning. I'm not raising this to the level of things that we had to do 2 years ago, but it is. I do think this is something we can work with. Was even prepared to put in non-culinary arts classrooms. That's how much I want to get this passed now, so we could address that either proactively or after the fact. But so long as I think we're all in the understanding that this will come up again after Dr. Title and has conferred with staff, I would, I guess I instead would like to just leave it as is so that we don't have another language issue that might require more comment and push the meeting later. And I also would like to thank the board for all of its due diligence, the policy committee members very much, the staff who has helped us so much, and the so many members of the public, either through personal attendance at our meetings or through their emails, have been absolutely invaluable in guiding the three of us.
Thank you. With no further conversation, the motion in front of us is that the Board of Education approve Policy 5516. I won't read the title of it. Everybody understand the motion in front of us? All in favor, please raise your hand. Mrs. Lou McCormick, Mr. Patton, Ms. Carnell, Mrs. Gerber, Mr. Dwyer, it's unanimous. It's unanimous. Thank you very much.
That way you didn't get my name wrong.
Right. I just want to clarify that this will be reviewed by September, correct?
That's what
for the culinary?
the statement was, yes.
Okay.
New business, approval of the educational specs for Dwight re-roofing, that the Board of Education approve the educational specifications for the Dwight re-roofing project. Do I have a motion? Mr. Convertito, do I have a second? Mrs. Gerber, any conversation on the Dwight re-roofing project? Mr. Llewellyn.
A couple questions. Do we know what the cost is yet?
We have an estimate in the in our capital planning, in our request to the town bodies, was prepared by our roofing experts based on prior projects, but we won't know the exact cost till it goes out to bid.
And the estimate is?
Was it about $1.2 million in that range?
And of the last couple...
$1,232,342.
1,232. And of the last couple of roofs that have gone out?
They've come in...
all on budget or under?
on or under, yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions from board members? If, Ms.
That's a
Carnell?
big roof. I mean, what was the price of the Mill Hill roof?
The Mill Hill roof is only about a $300,000 project, came in very low, but also wasn't nearly the number of square feet.
Right,
this
it
is.
wasn't the whole roof, I know.
No, this is virtually the whole roof. We say partial roof replacement, but it's virtually the entire roof. There's just a little section we're not doing.
$1 million, I should be grateful for the price I got.
You never know.
If there are no further questions, any comments from the members of the public on the acceptance of the educational specifications for Dwight re-roofing? Seeing nobody coming forward, any going back to the board? Are we ready to act? All in favor of the motion that the Board of Education approve the educational specifications for the Dwight re-roofing project, please raise your hand. And it is unanimous, 9-0. Thank you very much. A first reading, we'll dispense with the reading, but Ms. Maxon Kennelly, do you wish to make any comments on policy 5330?
Just primarily, this is in response to state statute, the addition of the teen dating violence language throughout the plan, both the plan and the policy itself. Other than that, there's a few minor language changes. The idea of, for example, with bullying, of changing the wording from victim to target was a semantic issue, but other than that, I think it's pretty straightforward. This is in response to state statute.
Any questions from the board? Mr. Fatterbean?
Through the chair, I guess, to the chair of the policy committee.
Sorry?
The state statute that requires teen dating violence, is that the same state statute as related to the bullying? Did they amend the state statute with respect to bullying, or it's a separate statute?
Is that a detailed question that perhaps...
Andrea, do you want to?
The separate statute. My own point of view, as far as it being a separate statute, I think teen dating violence is a different animal per se than bullying, and marrying the two may not necessarily be the best thing to do. I would have advised to do a separate policy specifically related to teen dating violence instead of trying to shoehorn in teen dating violence into the bullying policy, because I can see where teen dating violence may not be bullying, but it may be. It may be bullying as well as teen dating violence, but it can just be teen dating violence and not bullying necessarily. So I would have preferred it in two different policies directed to it rather than trying to do it this way.
Okay, through the policy chair, would you like Mrs. Leonardi to comment on that idea?
If you look on the back page where it cites the statutes that relate to this policy, in the last legislative session, 4 pieces of legislation were passed, and each of them has a little bit of impact on, and they use the Safe School Climate Plan, which is the plan that's directly connected to bullying. So it's not the same, it's not an amendment of the bullying statute, it's an amendment of the statute that says safe school climates, which is, they morphed the bullying statute into safe school climates last, whatever, 4 or 5 years ago when we passed this policy. It still happens to be policy 5330, and so the law requires that it go into this policy on safe school climates. And then that's what drives it all along. So these 4, PA 14172, PA 14196, PA 14232, and PA 14234, each of them had bits of language that all required these updates. I believe it was PA 14232, oh no, sorry, PA 14196, which is the an act concerning a statewide sexual abuse and assault awareness program,
within that piece of legislation, there is a piece that requires the Safe School Climate Plan to address both bullying and teen dating violence. And since the plan has to be approved by the state, that's why you can't kind of separate them from each other. Long story, but it's 4 pieces of law.
You may want to speak into the microphone if you're responding to... Anything else, Mr. Fattabine? No. Okay. Any other comments? If not, we will put this on the next regular meeting agenda. Mrs. Maxon Cannelli.
Just a request, as always, with policy, if it's possible for you to forward questions to me ahead of time, since obviously in certain cases I need a little bit of help on answering that one, as Ms. Leonardi just did, and I prefer as much as possible to give some advance warning on the nature of questions, so that if people have questions or several comments, if I could get the nature of those ahead of time, if possible, I would sincerely appreciate it.
Okay. The next item on our agenda is approval of the minutes, that recommended motion that the Board of Education approve the minutes of the special meeting of January 28, 2015. Do I have a motion? Mrs. Gerber, do I have a second? Mr. Convertito. This is the minutes that we deferred so that the corrected statement that Mrs. Maxon Cannelli made was in the minutes, which you'll see in red. Are we ready to vote? Okay, all in favor, please raise your hand. Mr. Patton, Ms. Carnell, Mrs. Gerber, Mr. Dwyer, Mr. Convertito, Mrs. Maxon Cannelli, all opposed. Mrs. Lou McCormick, Mr. Fattabine, Mr. Llewellyn. The motion passes 6-3. Approval of the minutes of February 24th, that the Board of Education approve the minutes of the regular meeting of February 24th. Do I have a motion? Mrs. Gerber, do I have a second? Mrs. Maxon Cannelli, any questions or comments on those minutes? Mr. Patton.
I'd like to make a motion to postpone this to the next regular meeting. There's a comment that I had said about redistricting that is slightly taken out of context. I just want the chance to research that and put in
As in the
changes.
past, we have asked board members to contact the secretary in advance.
And I realize
so that we're able to get the comments made and whatnot. So I would remind you of that promise that we've all made to Mrs. Gerber.
And I apologize.
Seconded.
Seconded. Any discussion on postponing consideration? Hearing none. All in favor, raise your hand. Mrs. Lou McCormick, Mr. Patton, Ms. Carnell, Mr. Convertito, Mrs. Maxon Cannelli, Mr. Llewellyn, all opposed. Mrs. Gerber, Mr. Dwyer, Mr. Fattabine, the motion passes 6-3. The superintendent has indicated he has no report. Any committee and liaison reports? I'm assuming time doesn't permit, but does anybody have a comment that they wish to make? Anybody have a comment on the committee and liaison reports that you wish to make? Open board comment. Any comments from the board that they wish to make at this time? Okay, I have a couple of things. One, I remind you of the RTM meeting to vote on the arbitration award, which is March 19th. And I remind you of the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance budget hearings that are coming up together with the RTM committee hearings on the budget. It is essential for all of us to make time to be at those meetings in support of our budget. So I ask you to do that. And so this Thursday is when we present to the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance. Now that the bylaws have been completed, the handbook needs to be updated to reflect the changes that we've made over the last 2 years, and Meg Brown and I are working on that, and that'll be a future agenda item. With no further business, we will ask for a... I'm sorry. Speak up into the microphone.
I apologize. I thought you had mentioned that you were going to say something, but just a thanks again to everyone for the town hall meeting that we ran, that it really was, great. a great showing by the public. We've
Yes.
received great feedback on, and I certainly hope we can do something like that again, as was mentioned at the town hall.
Yeah, and I believe the board members present all indicated that they thought they would want to do it again, and it's a question, as we always have, of finding when all 9 of us are together. Ms. Carnell, you have a comment that you wish to make?
I guess
under
that's-
open board comment.
I guess that was a good segue in that. I think the town hall meeting was great, and there was some really good conversation. In terms of listening to what some of the parents said, is there anything that the board is going to do to follow up on that?
That becomes a discussion item, and open board comment is just for open board comment, not for discussion, because then we would be discussing something without noticing it on the agenda.
Okay, then let me just change, I guess, what I was saying. One of the items that came up in the town hall was our science curriculum, and I'd like to ask that that be moved up this year to put on an agenda for a vote, that it be reviewed.
Thank you. No further items? Mrs. Lou McCormick, Mr. Llewellyn.
Right, so on that note, I couldn't agree more that while I understand social studies is up for review this coming summer and for next year, and I understand the difficulties involved in accelerating something out of our typical schedule. However, given all the comment and feedback I've heard over the last couple of years, it would be a wonderful thing if we could find the resources and allocate the time to try to accelerate the review of our science curriculum to be in the same year as social studies. I just hate to wait any longer. We have students that go through the system every year, and every year.
This is completely out of line, okay?
This is.
We're not supposed to be discussing this. And I've given you email responses, and evidently, you're not paying any attention to them.
Dr. Title, please.
So I just feel this is inappropriate use of the open board comment.
Apologize for the interruption of your comments. Can you finish up?
Yes, so I understand that there are some difficulties in accelerating the topic. However, we still would like to, I would like to, and I know others on the board would like to have the discussion with the board to consider the possibility of reallocating funds to accelerate it. And I just say this in open board comment so everyone knows.
Mr. Llewellyn?
Just real quickly, one of the comments that came up at the Saturday Forum, which I think was a great idea, was to have a similar open board discussion as it relates to the strategic plan as well, so that the public can give their input ahead of its completion as opposed to upon its completion. I think the other point I wanted to make is, as we're heading back into SBAC time, I think it would be really great to communicate out to the parents about, giving them a little bit more information about what the SBAC is going to be used for this year, because I know last year was transitional. So if we could communicate out to the parents, especially those in elementary, what the district will be using it for this year, and whether or not it will be, the scores will be shared back with parents, or if we're still in a test year.
Thank you very much. With no further comment, motion to adjourn. Mrs. Maxon Cannoli, Ms. Carnell, all in favor, please raise your hand. It is unanimous. We're done.